I sat in attorney Martin Fitzgerald's mahogany-paneled office, my hands trembling as he read my parents' will. The words blurred together until one sentence cut through like a knife. To our son, Bradley, we leave the entirety of our estate. My heart stopped. 28 years of being the responsible daughter, the caregiver, the one who sacrificed everything, and they left me nothing. Not even the grandmother's pearl necklace promised since childhood. Bradley, who hadn't visited in 5 years, got everything. The betrayal burned deeper than grief itself. The leather chair beneath me suddenly felt cold as Attorney Fitzgerald adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and continued reading the will in his measured professional tone. Each word hammered another nail into the coffin of everything I believed about my family. The family residence at 4217 Maple Grove Avenue, valued at approximately $800,000, shall pass to Bradley Michael Lawson. He read, his voice carrying no emotion, while mine threatened to shatter completely. I forced myself to look across the polished conference table at my brother. Bradley sat there in his expensive suit, the one he probably bought with money he'd borrowed from our parents, staring at his manicured hands. His jaw clenched and unclenched, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. Not once since we'd walked into this office had he acknowledged my presence. The investment accounts held at Fidelity and Charles Schwab, with a combined value of $1.2 million, to Bradley Michael Lawson. Fitzgerald continued flipping through pages with practiced efficiency. My mind reeled. $1.2 million. I thought about the countless nights I'd spent managing their medications, driving them to chemotherapy appointments, holding Mom's hand while poison dripped into her veins, all while Bradley was somewhere in Las Vegas or Atlantic City feeding his gambling addiction. The Lake House property in Finger Lakes, New York, including all furnishings and watercraft, to Bradley Michael Lawson. The Lake House, where I'd spent every summer as a child, where Dad taught me to fish and Mom showed me how to identify wildflowers, where I'd planned to take my own children someday if I ever had time for a family between caring for everyone else's needs. Lawson Electronics Incorporated, including all assets, intellectual property, and accounts receivable, to Bradley Michael Lawson. The business. Our father's legacy, built from nothing over 35 years of 16-hour days and weekend sacrifices. I'd worked there every summer since I was 14, learning inventory systems and customer relations, while Bradley complained about having to sweep floors for a week before quitting. Attorney Fitzgerald paused, setting down the will and picking up a sealed envelope. The afternoon sunlight streaming through his office windows caught the cream-colored paper, making it seem to glow. "Miss Lawson," he said, his gray eyes showing the first hint of sympathy since we'd begun, "your mother left instructions that this be given to you personally after the reading of the will." My fingers shook as I took the envelope. My name was written across the front in Mom's distinctive handwriting, the same careful script that had signed permission slips and birthday cards throughout my childhood. Inside a single sheet of her personal stationery, the rose-scented paper she had used for important correspondence. "My dearest Rosemary," I read silently, her voice echoing in my mind. "By the time you read this, your father and I will be gone, and you'll have questions about our decision. Please understand that we love you deeply, but Bradley needs this more than you do. You've always been the strong one, the successful one. You have your career, your independence. Bradley has struggled so much in life, and we believe this will give him the foundation he needs to finally find his way." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Strong, successful. I'd given up a promotion at my accounting firm to move back home and care for them. I'd put my entire life on hold, used my savings to cover their medical expenses when insurance wouldn't pay for experimental treatments. The letter continued, "We know you'll understand. You always do. You've never needed us the way Bradley has. That's why we made this decision 3 months ago after much consideration." 3 months ago, right after I'd spent 6 weeks sleeping on a cot in Mom's hospital room managing her care during the worst of her chemotherapy. Right after I'd cleaned vomit from her hair at 3 in the morning and told her she was still beautiful. Right after I'd convinced her to keep fighting when she wanted to give up. But the next paragraph made my blood run cold. We've already helped secure Bradley's future by paying off his debts last year. The $300,000 came from the education fund we'd set aside years ago. We know you won't mind since you've done so well on your own. $300,000. My education fund, the money my grandparents had left specifically for my doctorate degree, the dream I deferred to, care for them. They'd given it to Bradley for gambling debts. I looked up from the letter to find Attorney Fitzgerald watching me carefully. "Are there any questions about the will's provisions?" he asked gently. "Is it legal?" My voice came out as a whisper. "Can they really leave me nothing after I gave up everything to care for them?" "I'm afraid the will is entirely legal and properly executed," he replied. "Your parents were of sound mind when they made these changes. The witnesses confirmed they understood the implications." Sound mind. I repeated the words, tasting bitter. They changed this while my mother was going through chemotherapy, while medications affected her judgment, while my brother was filling their heads with lies. Bradley finally looked up, his blue eyes, so like our father's, meeting mine with an expression I couldn't read. "Rose." He started using the childhood nickname he'd abandoned years ago. "Don't." I stood abruptly, the letter crumpling in my fist. "Don't you dare act like you care now." Attorney Fitzgerald cleared his throat. "There are some papers that need to be signed regarding the estate execution. As the sole beneficiary, Mr. Lawson, you'll need to—" "I need some air," I interrupted, gathering my purse with shaking hands. The conference room suddenly felt suffocating, the walls closing in with the weight of betrayal. "Rose, wait," Bradley called out, but I was already at the door. "Miss Lawson." Attorney Fitzgerald's voice stopped me. "There is one more matter. The will does name you as executor of the estate responsible for managing the distribution of assets. It's a position of trust, though it carries no inheritance benefit." Executor. They'd left me nothing but wanted me to do the work of giving everything to Bradley. The irony was so sharp it could cut. "Of course it does," I said, not turning around, "because even in death they knew I'd take care of everything. I always do." I walked out of the office, leaving behind the brother who'd stolen my past and the lawyer who'd just confirmed I had no future, at least not the one I'd sacrificed everything to protect. The parking garage's concrete pillars blurred past as I stumbled toward my car, a 10-year-old Honda Civic that suddenly seemed to mock my life choices. While I'd been driving something reliable and practical, saving money to help with Mom and Dad's expenses, Bradley had been upgrading his lifestyle with their secret handouts. "Rosemary, stop, please." Bradley's footsteps echoed behind me, his designer shoes clicking against the pavement. I quickened my pace, but he caught up, grabbing my elbow near my car. "Don't touch me." I yanked my arm away, whirling to face him. Up close, I could see the toll his lifestyle had taken. Despite the expensive suit, his face showed signs of stress. Deeper lines around his eyes, a nervous twitch in his jaw. "We need to talk," he said, glancing around the empty garage level nervously. "You don't understand what's been happening." "I understand perfectly. You swooped in like a vulture while I was exhausted from caregiving and convinced our dying parents to disinherit me." How much manipulation did it take, Bradley? How many lies? He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up. "You want the truth? Fine. Yes, I knew about the will change. I was there when they did it." The admission hit like a physical blow. You were there. While I was at the pharmacy getting Mom's pain medications, you were there watching them sign away my future. "It wasn't like that," he protested, then paused, conflict playing across his features. "Actually, no. You know what? It was exactly like that, but you need to understand why." "There's no why that makes this acceptable, Bradley. No reason that justifies—" I told them you were only there for the money. The words exploded from him like a confession ripped from his soul. I said you'd been complaining about taking care of them, that you'd called them burdens. I told them I'd overheard you on the phone with your friends saying you couldn't wait for it to be over so you could get your inheritance and move to Europe. My legs threatened to give out. I leaned against my car for support. Europe. I've never even been to Europe. I canceled a work trip to Paris to care for them. I know. His voice dropped to nearly a whisper. I made it all up. Every word. But that's not the worst part. How could it possibly get worse? Bradley pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling as he navigated to an app I didn't recognize. Remember how Mom kept saying you never called anymore? How Dad complained you stopped responding to his texts? I called every day when I wasn't there. I texted constantly, checking on them, reminding them about medication, sending pictures of things that might cheer them up. The hurt of their accusations came flooding back, Mom's tearful voice asking why I'd abandoned them when they needed me most. You did. Bradley turned the phone screen toward me. But they never got those calls or texts. This app, it clones phone numbers. I've been intercepting your communications for the last 8 months of their lives. The garage seemed to spin around me. 8 months. 8 months of my parents thinking I'd abandoned them while their son played puppet master with their emotions. Every call you made I got instead. Every text went to my phone. I'd respond just enough to keep you from getting suspicious, then delete them. As far as Mom and Dad knew, you'd cut them off completely, except for the bare minimum visits. You're sick. The words came out as a broken whisper. You're actually sick. How could you do that to them? They died, thinking I didn't love them. That's still not the worst part. Bradley's face had gone pale, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool garage air. I hired someone, an actress. She'd call them pretending to be you. What? She had a script. She'd call maybe once a week always when I knew you were at work or sleeping after a night shift at the house. She'd say horrible things, cruel things, that you wish they'd hurry up and die, that you were tired of wasting your life on them, that you'd already started planning what to do with the inheritance. I doubled over like I'd been punched in the stomach, gasping for air. The cruelty of it was beyond comprehension. While I'd been spooning soup into my mother's mouth, wiping tears from her cheeks during the painful treatments, someone had been calling her, using my voice to break her heart. Mom cried. Bradley continued, seemingly unable to stop his confession now that it had started. Every time, Dad would hold her and tell her it couldn't be true, but after enough calls, even he started to believe it. The actress was good. She'd studied recordings of your voicemail messages to get the tone right. Recordings of my... I straightened up slowly, rage beginning to replace shock. You recorded my voice to help someone impersonate me to psychologically torture our dying parents. The gambling debts, he said desperately. You don't understand what kind of people I owed money to. They weren't going to accept payment plans or IOUs. They were going to break my legs, Rose, or worse. So you broke our parents' hearts instead. You isolated them from the daughter who loved them to steal money that wasn't yours. It worked, didn't it? A bitter laugh escaped him. The perfect crime, except I didn't expect to feel so... He trailed off, searching for words. Guilty, ashamed human. Empty. He slumped against the concrete pillar. I got everything, and it feels like nothing. Mom's last words to me were about you, you know. Even after everything I'd done, she asked me to take care of you, made me promise to share the inheritance. But you won't. I can't. The money's already allocated. The house is collateral for new debts. The business has loans against it. I'm in deeper now than before. Of course you are. I laughed, but it sounded hollow in the empty garage. Because that's what you do, Bradley. You take and take until there's nothing left, then you take some more. The actress, he said suddenly, as if remembering something crucial. Her name is Jennifer Martinez. She lives in Queens. I have her contact information recordings of the calls, proof of everything I did. Do you want it? I stared at him, trying to understand this new development. Why would you give me evidence against yourself? Because Mom was right about one thing. He said, meeting my eyes fully for the first time since we were children. You are the strong one. You'll survive this. You'll find a way to make things right, even if I have destroyed everything. You always do. He held out his phone, showing me a folder labeled Evidence, containing audio files, contracts, payment receipts. The complete documentation of his betrayal, organized with the same attention to detail he'd used to destroy our family. Take it, he urged. Maybe it'll help somehow. Maybe you can use it to get something back, or at least clear your name with people who might have heard Mom and Dad's complaints about you. I took the phone with numb fingers, forwarding the entire folder to my email and cloud storage. As the files transferred, I thought about the irony. He'd stolen everything, but was giving me the evidence that proved it. It wouldn't bring my parents back or restore their faith in me, but it was something. This doesn't make us even, I told him when the transfer completed. This doesn't fix what you broke. I know. He took his phone back, shoulders sagging. Nothing can fix it. Mom and Dad died thinking you hated them. I have to live with that. But so do you, and that's the part that keeps me up at night. I poisoned your last memories with them for money I've already lost. Why tell me now? Why confess? Bradley looked toward the exit, then back at me. Because the actress called me yesterday. Jennifer. She said she's been having nightmares about the calls. Said she wants to come forward, tell people what really happened. I figured you should hear it from me first. How noble of you, I said sarcastically, confessing only when you're about to be exposed anyway. I'm not noble. We both know that. He started walking backward toward the elevator, but I thought maybe if you knew the truth, you'd understand that it wasn't about you. It was never about hurting you. You were just collateral damage. Collateral damage. I repeated the words, tasting their bitterness. That's what I was to you. That's what Mom and Dad were. Collateral damage in your war against yourself. The elevator doors opened and Bradley stepped inside. As they began to close, he called out one last revelation. Check Mom's desk at the house. Bottom drawer, left side behind the hanging files. She hid things from me there. Maybe she left something for you after all. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in the parking garage with evidence of his betrayal and a burning need to get to my parents' house immediately. Whatever Mom had hidden, I needed to find it. I needed to discover if somewhere beneath the lies and manipulation she'd left me proof that she knew the truth. The key turned in the lock of my childhood home with the same familiar click I'd heard thousands of times, but today it sounded like a goodbye. In 48 hours, I'd need to return these keys to Bradley. My executor duties required me to inventory the house's contents before turning everything over to him. But first, I had a desk drawer to search. The living room still smelled faintly of Mom's lavender candles, though she'd been gone for 3 weeks now. Her reading glasses sat on the side table next to Dad's crossword puzzle book, forever frozen on a half-completed Sunday puzzle. I'd been the one to find them that morning, Dad in his recliner and Mom on the sofa having passed within hours of each other. The doctors called it broken heart syndrome. When one spouse dies, the other sometimes follows quickly. Even their deaths had been a partnership, something Bradley's manipulations couldn't destroy. I climbed the stairs to the second-floor office, my old room visible at the end of the hall. They'd kept it exactly as I'd left it when I moved out for college, unlike Bradley's room, which became a guest suite the moment he left. Another sign I'd missed. They'd always expected me to come back. Mom's desk sat in the corner by the window, overlooking the garden she'd loved. An antique secretary desk inherited from her mother, its rich cherry wood gleaming in the afternoon light. I ran my fingers over the smooth surface, remembering doing homework here while she paid bills, both of us working in comfortable silence. The bottom drawer stuck slightly as it always had. I reached behind the hanging files labeled taxes and insurance or feeling for anything unusual. My fingers found a manila envelope taped to the back of the drawer. Oh, Mom, I whispered, carefully extracting it. What did you hide? Inside, I found a treasure trove of documents that made my accountant's heart race and my daughter's heart break. Bank statements going back 15 years, each one carefully annotated in Mom's handwriting. Wire transfer receipts, cashier's check carbon copies, a ledger tracking every penny they'd given Bradley. The numbers were staggering. Not just the $300,000 from my education fund, that was merely the latest in a long pattern. $500,000 over 15 years, sometimes monthly payments of $5,000, other times lump sums of $20,000 or $30,000. Each entry annotated with Bradley's latest crisis: gambling debt, investment opportunity, business venture, legal trouble, fresh start. But it was the account numbers that made me sit down hard in Mom's desk chair. These weren't transfers from my parents' regular accounts. They were from trust accounts with a familiar prefix, the same trust my maternal grandparents had established for their grandchildren. I pulled up the original trust documents on my laptop, cross-referencing the account numbers. My grandparents had been clear separate trusts for Bradley and me, accessible at age 25, for education, home purchase, or starting a business, but with a crucial provision I'd forgotten. The trustee could make emergency distributions for health and welfare before then. My parents had been the trustees, and they drained Bradley's trust within 2 years of gaining control, then started on mine. The next document in Mom's envelope made everything clear. It was a letter from the bank dated 10 years ago, requiring additional signatures for withdrawals from my trust once I'd turned 25. Clipped to it were signature cards, dozens of them, with my name signed in handwriting that was close but not quite right. The R in Rosemary was too flowery, the Y had a curl I never used. Mom had been forging my signature for a decade. I spread the evidence across the desk, my forensic accounting training taking over. They'd been careful at first, small withdrawals that might go unnoticed. But as Bradley's needs grew, so did their desperation. The forgeries became sloppier, the amounts larger. In the last 2 years alone, they'd taken $200,000 from my trust. A sticky note fluttered to the floor, Mom's handwriting shakier than the rest. Bradley has the photos, blackmail, no choice. Forgive me. Photos, blackmail. I rifled through the remaining papers, finding a printed email from Bradley to Dad. The subject line, "Proof of your betrayal." The email had attachments I couldn't see, but Bradley's message was clear. Transfer $50,000 by Friday or I send these photos to Mom. She'll never forgive you for cheating with that woman. You know how her heart condition is. The shock could kill her. I studied the email date. 5 years ago, cross-referencing with the ledger, I found a $50,000 withdrawal that same week. Then another email 3 months later demanding more. The pattern was clear. Bradley had been blackmailing our father, and they'd been using my trust fund to pay him off. But something felt wrong about the timeline. I pulled up Dad's calendar from 5 years ago, still synced to the family cloud account. The date Bradley claimed the affair happened, Dad had been in the hospital for his knee surgery. I'd been there sleeping in the chair beside him for 3 days. Mom had been there every evening after work. I grabbed my phone, opening the evidence folder Bradley had given me. Sure enough, buried among the files was a subfolder labeled Insurance. Inside were the original photos he'd used for blackmail. My stomach turned as I recognized them immediately. They were from our family vacation to Miami Beach 20 years ago. Dad in his terrible Hawaiian shirt laughing at something off camera. But Bradley had digitally manipulated them, superimposing Dad with a woman who looked nothing like the original photo's composition. The editing was amateur at best. Wrong shadows, mismatched lighting, obviously spliced from different sources. "You knew," I said aloud to Mom's empty chair. "You had to know these were fake." But then I understood. It didn't matter if Mom believed them. The threat was that she'd see them at all, that Bradley would force her to question Dad, create doubt and pain in their marriage. With her heart condition, any major emotional stress was dangerous. They'd pay to protect her from even the suggestion of betrayal. I found more evidence in the envelope. Receipts for Bradley's apartment, his car payments, health insurance. They'd been supporting him entirely, not just bailing him out of crisis after crisis. He was a 35-year-old man who'd never held a job for more than 6 months, living off money stolen from his sister's future. The final document broke me. It was a printout from a medical website about thallium poisoning with symptoms highlighted: fatigue, nausea, hair loss, peripheral neuropathy. Next to it, a handwritten note. B's friend sold him this. Said it was for rats in his apartment. Watch food carefully. They'd known. Somehow they'd figured out Bradley might be poisoning them, yet they'd still changed their will to leave him everything. I photographed every document, uploaded them to multiple secure cloud services, then returned to the medical printout. If they'd suspected poisoning, there might be more evidence. I searched through Mom's other hiding spots: the jewelry box with the false bottom, the hollow book on the shelf, the Ziploc bag taped under the bathroom sink where she used to hide Christmas presents. In the bathroom, I found it: a collection of hair samples in small plastic bags, each dated over the last 6 months. Strands of her silver hair and Dad's carefully preserved. She'd been collecting evidence, but never used it. My phone rang, startling me. Sarah Martinez, my friend from law school who now specialized in estate law. "Rose, are you sitting down?" Her voice was tense with excitement. "I've been reviewing the documents you sent about the will and the forged trust withdrawals. You have grounds to challenge everything." "The will was legal, Sarah," Fitzgerald confirmed it. "The will might be legal, but the context around it isn't. Undue influence, fraudulent inducement, financial elder abuse. Bradley hits every marker, but more importantly, those forged signatures on trust withdrawals, that's federal wire fraud. Each instance is a separate count. We're talking about 87 counts of wire fraud with damages exceeding $300,000. They're dead, Sarah. I can't prosecute my dead parents." "No, but you can prosecute Bradley. He was the beneficiary of the fraudulent transfers. If you can prove he knew about or orchestrated the forgeries, he's liable. And from what you've told me, you have evidence he was extorting them." I looked at the hair samples in my hand. I might have evidence of more than that. "What do you mean?" "I need to make another call first. Can you start preparing the paperwork to challenge the will based on undue influence and get me a court order to freeze the estate assets before Bradley liquidates everything?" "Already drafting it. Rose, I know this is hard, but your parents were victims too. Bradley manipulated everyone." After hanging up, I called my cousin who worked at a private forensic lab. "Marcus, I need a favor. Hair analysis for heavy metals, specifically thallium, off the books and rush basis." "That's an unusual request. Thallium's not something you see often outside of homicide cases." "I know." I sealed the hair samples in evidence bags I found in Mom's desk, labeled with a case number from her old paralegal days. That's what I'm afraid of. As I prepared to leave, I noticed a business card tucked into Mom's desk calendar for tomorrow's date. Pinnacle Corporate Holdings, Asset Acquisition Division, with a meeting time of 2 p.m. The address was for Bradley's attorney's office. I photographed the card, then called the number. A receptionist answered, and I identified myself as the estate executor, calling to confirm tomorrow's meeting. "Yes, Ms. Lawson, we have you scheduled to discuss the Lawson Electronics acquisition. Mr. Bradley Lawson indicated you'd be signing the transfer documents as executor." My blood ran cold. The full acquisition of the entire company. "Yes, ma'am. The purchase price of $2 million with the closing scheduled for next week. Will you be bringing the corporate seal and documentation?" "I'll bring everything necessary," I said carefully. "Thank you for confirming." I hung up and immediately called Sarah back. Change of plans. Bradley's trying to sell Dad's company. The meeting's tomorrow. But he can't sell without the executor's signature. You'd have to approve it. He's planning to forge it, just like Mom forged mine for years. I gathered all the evidence, my mind racing. Sarah, I need you to research something else. If the will names me as executor, but Bradley as beneficiary, what happens if Bradley is convicted of murdering the testators? Silence on the other end then. In New York states someone who murders the testator cannot inherit. The estate would pass as if the murderer predeceased the victims. Since your parents had no other children, it would all come to me. The weight of that possibility settled on my shoulders. Not that I want it. Not like this. Rose, if you have evidence of murder, you need to go to the police. Now. I thought about Mom's hidden documents, her careful collection of evidence, her desperate attempts to protect what she could while trapped by Bradley's escalating schemes. She'd known she was going to die. She'd prepared what she could for me to find. I will, I promised. But first, I have a business meeting to attend. Bradley's not the only one who can play the long game. As I left my childhood home, arms full of evidence, I realized Mom had left me something in that desk after all. Not money or property, but the tools for justice. She'd known I was the strong one, the fighter. She'd given me exactly what I needed to stop Bradley and honor their true legacy. The truth. Tomorrow, Bradley would learn that forgery and fraud were family trades, but I was the one who'd inherited Mom's attention to detail. And unlike him, I'd use it to save what was left of our family's honor, not destroy it. Sarah Martinez's law office occupied the 20th floor of a Manhattan high-rise, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of Central Park that normally calmed my nerves. Today, nothing could quiet the storm inside me as I spread the evidence across her conference table. Walk me through this one more time, Sarah said, her dark eyes sharp as she studied the documents. The trust transfers the forged signatures, the blackmail. I see how they connect. But this business sale tomorrow. Bradley's trying to liquidate everything before anyone can stop him. I pulled up the corporate documents on my laptop. Lawson Electronics is worth at least $5 million in a fair market sale. He's selling for $2 million cash closing next week. The buyer is probably connected to his gambling debts. But he needs your signature as executors. He's planning to forge it. He doesn't know the will named me executor, not just beneficiary. Attorney Fitzgerald mentioned it casually during the reading, but Bradley was too focused on his windfall to pay attention. Sarah's assistant knocked and entered with coffee and a stack of freshly printed documents. The emergency motions are ready for your signature, Ms. Martinez. Perfect timing. Sarah handed me the papers. This is a motion to freeze all estate assets pending investigation of fraud and undue influence. The second one challenges the will based on Bradley's manipulation. Sign here, here, and here. As I signed, my phone buzzed. Marcus from the forensic lab. Rose, I fast-tracked those hair samples. You need to see these results immediately. I'm sending the preliminary report now. My email chimed, and I opened the encrypted file. The numbers made my stomach drop. Thallium levels 20 times the normal range, increasing concentrations over the 6-month period. Sarah read over my shoulder. That's attempted murder, or murder depending on whether it contributed to their deaths. The concentrations aren't typically fatal, Marcus's voice continued through the speaker. But for someone with existing health conditions, especially heart problems or cancer treatment, it would significantly weaken their system. It's sometimes called inheritance powder for a reason. Can you prepare a formal report for law enforcement? Already done. Rose, I also found something else. The hair shows signs of selenium supplementation in the last 2 months. Someone was trying to counteract the thallium. Mom knew. She'd been trying to protect herself and Dad, buying time to get affairs in order, but time ran out. We need to get to the police, Sarah insisted. This changes everything. First, I need to check something. I pulled up Bradley's phone records from the evidence he'd given me, cross-referencing with the business card. 3 calls to Pinnacle Corporate Holdings over the last month. But more interesting were the calls to a number I recognized. Tommy Chen, a known loan shark who operated out of Queens. Bradley owes Tommy Chen $3 million, I said, pieces clicking into place. Pinnacle is probably a front company. They're not buying Dad's business. They're stealing it to settle Bradley's debts. Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard. Pinnacle Corporate Holdings registered last month. CEO is Vincent Russo, who has ties to organized crime. This isn't just fraud, Rose. This is money laundering, racketeering, possibly RICO violations. My phone rang, an unknown number with a Queens area code. Rosemary Lawson. A woman's nervous voice. This is Jennifer Martinez. I played you. In the phone calls to your parents, Bradley Lawson's friend gave me your number. My hand tightened on the phone. I know who you are. I need to tell you something. Bradley didn't hire me directly. It was another man older, said he was Bradley's uncle, Christopher. Something. He paid cash, gave me scripts recordings of your voice, but the things he had me say, I can't sleep anymore. Your mother's crying haunts me. Christopher, I put her on speaker. Bradley doesn't have an uncle named Christopher. That's what I thought. So I did some digging. The man who hired me, his real name is Christopher Lawson. I found an old photo online. He's your father's brother. Sarah and I exchanged glances. Uncle Chris had disappeared 20 years ago after a family fight about money. Dad never talked about him. I kept recordings, Jennifer continued, of my calls, of him giving me instructions. He said this was just the beginning, that Bradley was learning the family business. I thought he meant electronics. Can you send me those recordings? I'll do better. I'll testify. What I did was horrible, but what they're planning is worse. Christopher mentioned something about finishing what he started with your grandparents. My grandparents, they died in a car accident when I was 10, leaving the trusts that had funded Bradley's lifestyle. But what if... Jennifer, we need to meet. Can you come to Manhattan tomorrow morning? I'll be there. And Ms. Lawson, I'm sorry. Your mother seemed like a lovely woman. She didn't deserve what we did to her. After hanging up, I turned to Sarah. We need to expand this investigation. What if Bradley learned from someone else? What if this pattern goes back further? You think your uncle killed your grandparents? I think Bradley's not smart enough to come up with this scheme alone. Thallium poisoning, forged documents, elaborate manipulation. Someone taught him. Sarah's assistant interrupted again. Ms. Martinez, there's a Detective Patricia Morgan here from the NYPD Financial Crimes Division. She says it's about the Lawson estate. My pulse quickened. Had Bradley already tried to forge documents? But when Detective Morgan entered, her first words surprised me. Ms. Lawson, I'm here about suspicious activity reports filed by 3 banks regarding large transfers from trust accounts in your name. The FBI asked us to investigate possible elder abuse and wire fraud. The FBI, Sarah stood. This is already a federal investigation. Has been for 2 months. We've been building a case, but we needed someone with standing to come forward. Detective Morgan pulled out a tablet. Your brother's name came up in connection with several similar cases. Elderly parents, trust funds, suspicious deaths. Always the same pattern. How many cases? 17 in the tri-state area. Your parents would be 18 and 19. She showed me photos of other victims, all elderly couples who died within months of changing their wills. We think there's a network. Bradley's just one player. I thought about Uncle Chris, about 17 other families destroyed. I have evidence, documents, recordings, medical proof of poisoning, and a witness who can testify about the conspiracy. Then we need to move fast. Bradley Lawson boarded a flight to Miami an hour ago. We think he's running. No. I realized, checking the Pinnacle meeting confirmation. He's not running. The meeting tomorrow isn't here. It's in Miami. He's going to forge my signature there, complete the sale outside New York jurisdiction. Detective Morgan smiled grimly. Not if we arrest him first. Ms. Lawson, we'd like you to wear a wire to that meeting. Help us take down the entire network. Absolutely not, Sarah protested. My client isn't bait for a federal sting operation. But I was already nodding. I'll do it, but first I need to make one more stop. Where? Lawson Electronics. If I'm going to play executor at this meeting, I need to know what Bradley's really selling, and I have a feeling there's more hidden in Dad's office than just business assets. Detective Morgan assigned 2 undercover officers to accompany me. As we left Sarah's office, I felt the weight of what I'd discovered. This wasn't just about my inheritance anymore. It was about stopping a murder network that had destroyed multiple families. Bradley thought he'd won by taking everything. He didn't realize that in his greed, he'd given me the one thing money couldn't buy: the chance to get justice for our parents and all the others. The strong one Mom had called me. Time to prove her right. The Lawson Electronics building loomed ahead, its familiar sign a reminder of everything at stake. Somewhere inside were the final pieces of this puzzle. And tomorrow in Miami, I'd use them to bring down the brother who'd betrayed us all. But first, I needed to understand what Bradley was really selling, because in his desperation to pay off debts, he might have revealed more than he intended. The executor's signature wasn't just about money, it was about control. And Bradley had just made the fatal mistake of showing me exactly where to apply pressure. Game on, little brother. You taught me the family business after all. But unlike you, I'm going to use it to save families, not destroy them. The Pinnacle Corporate Holdings conference room in Miami radiated the kind of aggressive luxury that screamed money laundering. Chrome and glass surfaces reflected the harsh Florida sunlight, while abstract art, worth more than most people's homes, decorated the walls. I sat at the polished black table briefcase at my side, wearing the wire Detective Morgan's team had carefully concealed in my designer blazer, a purchase I'd made specifically for this performance. Bradley entered flanked by 2 men who looked like they benchmarked their career success by felony convictions. His confident stride faltered when he saw me sitting in what he'd assumed would be his chair. Rose, what are you doing here? His tan from yesterday had faded to a sickly pallor. Attending the meeting you scheduled. I opened my briefcase with practiced calm, extracting the corporate seal and executor documentation. As executor of the Lawson estate, I need to review any major asset transfers. I'm sure you understand. Vincent Russo, whom I recognized from the FBI photos Detective Morgan had shown me, stepped forward. His $1,000 suit couldn't disguise the prison tattoos peeking above his collar. Ms. Lawson, we weren't expecting you. My brother sometimes forgets important details, I smiled pleasantly while arranging the papers before me, like the fact that executors have fiduciary duties that prevent us from rubber-stamping suspicious transactions. Bradley's jaw clenched. Rose, we should talk privately. No need. I've already reviewed the purchase agreement you sent over. I held up the document. $2 million for a company worth $5 million, with a closing timeline of 3 days. Any competent executor would flag this as potential fraud. The market's been tough, Russo interjected smoothly. Your brother explained the company needs immediate capital infusion. Interesting. I pulled out the real Lawson Electronics financial statements I'd retrieved from Dad's office, not the forgeries Bradley had provided. Because according to these authenticated documents, the company has $3 million in cash reserves and contracts worth $7 million over the next 2 years. We're actually in the strongest position in company history. Bradley grabbed the papers, scanning them with growing panic. These weren't the cooked books he'd prepared. Where did you get these? From Dad's secure files, the ones you didn't know about because you never actually worked at the company long enough to learn our systems. I turned to Russo, maintaining my professional facade while my heart hammered against the wire. Mr. Russo, I'm curious about Pinnacle's interest in electronics manufacturing. Your company was formed just last month. What's your experience in this industry? We have diverse interests, he said carefully, but I caught the look he exchanged with his associates. Diverse. Like your connection to Tommy Chen. I watched Russo's face harden. Oh, did Bradley not mention that I know about the $3 million debt, the one you're settling by stealing my family's company? You're making serious accusations, Russo warned, his friendly mask slipping. I'm stating facts. Bradley owes Chen $3 million. This sale price of $2 million plus the $1 million in liquidated inventory from our warehouse equals exactly $3 million. Creative accounting, but hardly subtle. Bradley slammed his hand on the table. Enough, sign the papers, Rose. You're the executor. You have to do what's best for the estate. I am. I pulled out my phone, pretending to check messages while actually activating the backup recording app Detective Morgan had installed, which is why I've already filed an injunction preventing any sale of estate assets pending a full audit. Judge Harrison signed it this morning. You did what? Bradley lunged forward, but Russo's hand on his shoulder stopped him. She's bluffing, one of Russo's men said. No judge would act that fast. I displayed the official court order on my phone. Judge Harrison takes elder financial abuse very seriously, especially when there's evidence of forged documents, fraudulent transfers, and, I paused for effect, murder. The room temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. Russo's eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. That's a heavy word to throw around, Ms. Lawson. It's an accurate one. I pulled out the toxicology report, keeping my hands steady despite the fear coursing through my veins. Thallium poisoning over 6 months. Hair samples showing increasing concentrations. Medical records documenting symptoms consistent with heavy metal poisoning. All carefully collected by my mother before she died. Bradley's face went white. Rose, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You poisoned our parents to accelerate your inheritance. When that wasn't fast enough, you increased the dose. But Mom figured it out. She started taking selenium supplements, documented everything, hid evidence for me to find. This is insane. Russo stood gesturing to his men. We're done here. Bradley, handle your family drama elsewhere. Leaving so soon? I kept my voice steady. I thought you'd want to hear about the FBI investigation into your money laundering operation. Or should we discuss the 17 other elderly couples who died under similar circumstances, all connected to debts owed to Tommy Chen's organization? Russo froze. Behind him, his associate's hands moved toward poorly concealed weapons. You're wearing a wire. It wasn't a question. Russo's voice had gone deadly quiet. No wire necessary. I held up my hands, letting them see I had nothing. Everything I've said is documented in files already delivered to the FBI, NYPD, and the Securities and Exchange Commission. This meeting was simply to confirm our suspicions. It was a calculated lie. The wire was recording everything, but they didn't need to know that. Bradley looked between me and Russo like a trapped animal. Vinny, she's bluffing. She has to be. Rose, isn't this calculating? Aren't I? I laughed, but it held no humor. You spent 6 months teaching me exactly how calculating family can be. Consider this your graduation ceremony. A knock at the door interrupted the rising tension. Marcus Chen entered. Not my cousin, but Tommy Chen's nephew, whom I'd identified from the FBI files. He looked at the scene with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Uncle Tommy sends his regards, Marcus said calmly. He's interested in the outcome of this meeting. Tell Tommy he'll get his money, Russo snapped. Actually, he won't. I addressed Marcus directly. Bradley's debts are based on fraudulent collateral. He pledged assets he didn't own using forged documents. In legal terms, the contracts are void. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That's an interesting interpretation. It's the law. Bradley can't pledge what he doesn't own, and he owned nothing until our parents died. Every loan document dated before their deaths 3 weeks ago is fraudulent. Your uncle's been lending money based on lies. You're trying to get me killed, Bradley whispered, real terror in his eyes now. No, Bradley, you got yourself killed the moment you decided our parents' lives were worth less than your gambling debts. I turned back to Marcus. However, I have a proposition for Mr. Chen. The FBI is closing in. Russo's operation is blown, but if Chen cooperates, provides evidence about the murder network, he could negotiate immunity. Marcus studied me for a long moment. You're not what I expected, Ms. Lawson. People rarely are when you only see them through their brother's lies. I gathered my documents, standing with deliberate calm. Gentlemen, this concludes our business. Bradley, you'll be hearing from law enforcement shortly. Mr. Russo, I'd suggest consulting your attorney. Marcus, please tell your uncle that Rosemary Lawson is happy to discuss legitimate business opportunities once this criminal matter is resolved. I'd made it 3 steps toward the door when Russo spoke. You're not leaving this room. Actually, she is. The door burst open, revealing Detective Morgan and a team of FBI agents, weapons drawn. Vincent Russo, Bradley Lawson, you're under arrest for conspiracy, wire fraud, money laundering, and murder. Hands where we can see them. The room erupted in chaos. Russo's men went for their weapons but were quickly subdued. Bradley stood frozen, staring at me with a mixture of betrayal and bewilderment. You were wearing a wire, he said dully as they cuffed him. Of course I was. I watched the agents lead him away, feeling nothing but emptiness where rage had burned. You taught me that family will betray you. I just learned the lesson better than you expected. Detective Morgan approached, removing my wire with practiced efficiency. Outstanding work, Ms. Lawson. Your performance was flawless. It wasn't a performance. I looked around the room where my brother had planned to finish destroying our family. Every word was true. He killed them, and I'm going to prove it. With what you've given us, that won't be difficult. She handed me a receipt for the wire. We've got enough to roll up the entire network. Your testimony will be crucial. Marcus Chen remained seated throughout the arrests, calmly sipping water. When the room cleared except for 2 agents guarding him, he spoke. My uncle will want to meet with you. I meant what I said. Once the criminal matters are resolved, I'm happy to discuss legitimate business. I met his gaze steadily. Lawson Electronics needs investment partners who understand long-term growth over quick cash grabs. He smiled slightly. You're definitely not what Bradley described. He said you were weak, sentimental, easily manipulated. He saw what he wanted to see. I collected my briefcase, exhaustion suddenly weighing on my shoulders. People often do when they're building justifications for cruelty. As I left the conference room, I passed Bradley being loaded into an FBI van. Our eyes met through the window. For a moment, I saw the brother I'd once loved. The boy who'd helped me build blanket forts and promised to protect me from monsters. Then, the moment passed, and I saw him clearly, the monster he'd become. Rose, he called out desperately. Rose, please, you don't understand what you've done. They'll kill me in prison. Chen's people will get to me. I paused beside the van. Then you should have thought about that before you killed our parents. I didn't mean for them to die. It was just supposed to make them weaker, more manageable. Uncle Chris said. Uncle Chris? I stepped closer, Detective Morgan beside me. Christopher Lawson. Bradley's eyes widened as he realized his mistake. I want a lawyer. You'll need one. I turned away, done with his manipulations. Goodbye, Bradley. As the van pulled away, Detective Morgan touched my shoulder. You did the right thing. Did I watched my brother disappear into custody, knowing this was likely the last time I'd see him free. I destroyed my family today. No, she said firmly. Your brother destroyed your family. You just stopped him from destroying others. The Miami sun beat down mercilessly as I walked to my rental car. In my briefcase were the documents that would restore my inheritance, rebuild my father's company, and fund the foundation I planned to create in my parents' memory. Justice had been served, but it tasted like ashes. My phone buzzed. Sarah Martinez. Injunction approved. All assets frozen. You did it. I had done it. Used Bradley's own playbook against him, turned his schemes inside out, beat him at his own game. The strong one, Mom had called me, but strength I was learning could be a lonely virtue when it meant standing in the rubble of everything you'd once called family. Time to fly home and pick up the pieces. There would be trials, testimony, and the slow work of healing. But first, I had a company to save and a legacy to rebuild. This time, on a foundation of truth instead of lies. My hands trembled as I inserted the key into my parents' front door for what might be the last time. The FBI had given me 72 hours to gather additional evidence before they sealed the house as a crime scene. What I'd discovered in the past 24 hours made those 3 days feel like a ticking bomb. The mahogany staircase creaked under my weight as I climbed to Bradley's old room. During my executor inventory, I'd noticed he'd been staying here recently. Clothes in the closet, toiletries in the bathroom. Now I understood why. He'd been monitoring our parents' decline, adjusting his poisoning schedule like some monstrous science experiment. His laptop sat on the desk, still logged in. Careless, but Bradley had always been overconfident. I opened his email, finding correspondence with someone named C.L., dating back 2 years. Christopher Lawson. Our uncle had been orchestrating everything from the shadows. One email thread made my blood run cold. By B. Increase the dose. They're building tolerance. We need this done before the annual audit. Remember, the house has 3 mortgages now. If the banks find out, we lose everything. CL. Bradley's response, did what you said. Mom's getting suspicious, though. Found her researching symptoms online. Then we accelerate. I've handled this 17 times. Trust the process. CL. 17 times. 17 elderly couples dead, their children enriched, their estates plundered. I screenshotted everything, uploading to the secure cloud the FBI had provided. A folder labeled House Documents caught my attention. Inside were mortgage applications, each for different banks, each claiming the $800,000 house was unencumbered. Bradley had forged our parents' signatures and taken out 3 separate mortgages, totaling $2.4 million. The first mortgage was due tomorrow. My phone rang, an unknown number with a local area code. Is this Rosemary Lawson? A woman's crisp voice. This is Patricia Winters from First National Bank. I'm calling about the mortgage payment due on your parents' property. What's the current balance? I asked, already knowing the answer would devastate me. $837,000, with tomorrow's payment of $62,000 overdue. Will you be handling this as executor? Can you send me the original loan documents? I need to review them for the estate. Of course, but Ms. Lawson, I should warn you, if tomorrow's payment isn't received, we'll have to initiate foreclosure proceedings. The loan is already in default. 2 more calls came in rapid succession. Second Federal Bank, $790,000 outstanding. Liberty Trust, $780,000, each believing they held the primary mortgage on the same property. Triple mortgaging, the same house was federal fraud, but Bradley had been clever. Different banks, different loan officers' applications submitted on the same day, so no liens would show up during title searches. By the time the banks discovered the overlap, he'd planned to be gone with the cash. I called Sarah Martinez. We have a bigger problem. Bradley took out $2.4 million in fraudulent mortgages on the house. First payment was due yesterday. They're starting foreclosure. All 3 banks. All 3. If any of them foreclose, the others will discover the fraud. The estate will be tied up in litigation for years. Unless, Sarah paused, thinking, Rose, as executor, you have the power to pay debts to preserve estate assets. If you can cover the payments temporarily, we can negotiate with the banks once Bradley's arrested. With what money he's drained everything. The FBI asset forfeiture from the Miami bust. They seized $2 million in cash from Russo's offices. The money meant for the fraudulent sale. As the victim of the crime, you can petition for immediate release of funds to prevent further damages. Hope flickered. How fast? With the right judge, 24 hours. Maybe less if we emphasize the foreclosure deadline. Do it. I was already searching Bradley's files for more evidence. I'll handle things here. In Bradley's closet behind a false panel, I remembered from childhood hide-and-seek games I found his real treasure trove. Vials of white powder labeled with chemical formulas. Thallium sulfate, enough to kill dozens of people. Receipts showed he'd bought it from a medical supply company using Dad's forged credentials. Below the poison was something worse, Bradley's journal, his handwriting getting progressively more erratic as the entries continued documented everything. Day 1. Started the protocol Uncle Chris designed. 0.5 in their morning coffee, no immediate effects. Day 47 increased to 2 milagre. Mom's hair falling out, told her it was stress. Day 132, Dad's having trouble walking. Perfect timing. He can't check the business accounts anymore. Day 186, Mom knows. Found her hiding hair samples. Increased dose to 5 milligrams. Uncle Chris says we're too close to stop now. This day 203. They're weaker, but not dying. Uncle Chris provided something new. Said it's faster. Mom can barely speak. I told her Rose abandoned her. She cried. The final entry was dated the day they died. It's done. Uncle Chris was right. The new compound worked overnight, made it look natural. Rose will find them tomorrow. She'll be destroyed. Perfect crime. Except it wasn't perfect. His arrogance had made him document everything, creating a prosecutor's dream of evidence. I photographed each page, my hands shaking with rage and grief. They'd suffered for 7 months while their son slowly murdered them. A notification popped up on Bradley's laptop. New email from CL. Heard about Miami, you idiot. Burn everything and meet me at the warehouse. We're leaving tonight. The email included an address in Queens. Uncle Chris was still in New York, planning to run. I forwarded it to Detective Morgan immediately. Her response was instant. Do not go there. We're mobilizing units now. But I was already in my car, rage, overriding reason. This man had taught my brother to be a killer turned family into a weapon. 17 families destroyed, and they were planning to disappear into the night like smoke. My phone rang continuously as I drove. Sarah, Detective Morgan, the FBI. I ignored them all, focused on the GPS leading me to a rundown industrial district. The warehouse was exactly what you'd expect for a criminal hideout. Abandoned, isolated, perfect for disappearing people or evidence. I parked a block away, texting the address to Detective Morgan with a simple message. He's here. I'm watching the exit. Bradley's Porsche sat near the loading dock, engine running. Through grimy windows, I could see figures moving inside shadows, carrying boxes. They were destroying evidence, preparing to run. A man emerged who could only be Uncle Chris, 20 years older but unmistakable. Dad's features twisted into something cruel and calculating. He directed Bradley to load boxes into a van while checking his watch obsessively. They were going to escape. The FBI was still minutes away, and every second meant more evidence destroyed. I made a decision that went against every safety protocol Detective Morgan had drilled into me. I called the mortgage companies. First National Bank. This is Rosemary Lawson. I'm at the property now and I've discovered something you need to know. The mortgage you hold. There are 2 others on the same property. Bradley Lawson committed fraud. The explosion of concern on the other end was immediate. I gave them the other banks' names, then called those banks with the same information. Within minutes, I'd created a financial storm that would freeze every account Bradley had touched. But I'd underestimated Uncle Chris's paranoia. He must have had alerts on the accounts because suddenly, both men were running for their vehicles. Bradley jumped in his Porsche while Chris dove into the van. They were splitting up. I had seconds to decide who to follow. I chose Chris. Bradley was finished. His face was on every law enforcement database. But Chris had survived 20 years underground. If he disappeared now, he'd never face justice. Following at a distance, I called Detective Morgan. Christopher Lawson is in a white van license plate JFK 8932 heading north on Industrial Avenue. Bradley went south in a silver Porsche. We've got units converging. Do not engage Rose. These men are desperate. Chris's van weaved through traffic, clearly aware he was being hunted. But I knew these streets from Dad's stories about building his business here. When Chris turned toward the BQE, I guessed his destination. Newark Airport, where cash could still buy anonymity. A text from Sarah interrupted my pursuit. Judge signed emergency order. $2 million released to prevent foreclosure. Banks notified to freeze all fraudulent activity. You did it. The house was safe, but that felt hollow while my parents' killer tried to escape. Chris's van suddenly swerved into a parking garage. I followed, ignoring every instinct, screaming danger. The garage was empty except for construction equipment. Chris had abandoned the van door, still open, engine running. I parked, carefully grabbing the tire iron from my trunk. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. I know you're here. Uncle Chris. My voice echoed off concrete. It's over. The FBI has Bradley. They have your emails, your 17 murders, everything. Rosemary. His voice came from the shadows, calm and oddly pleased. You look just like your grandmother, same righteous anger. She had it too right before the accident. My blood froze. You killed them too. Grandma and Grandpa. It wasn't an accident. Brake lines are so unreliable in old cars. He stepped into view holding a gun with practiced ease. They were going to cut me out of the will. Said I was unstable, needed help. Can you imagine? Their own son. You are unstable. You're a serial killer who targets families. I'm a survivor, he corrected. In nature, the weak feed the strong. Your grandparents were weak. Your parents were weak. Bradley was weak. But you? He smiled, and it was Dad's smile perverted into something monstrous. You might be strong enough to understand. Understand what? That you're a pathetic old man who couldn't earn anything honestly. His face darkened. Careful, niece. That smart mouth is what got your mother the extra doses. Bradley told me how you questioned everything, investigated their finances. We had to accelerate because of you. The admission hit like a physical blow. My diligence had triggered their murders. If I'd been less suspicious, less protective. Don't blame yourself, Chris continued, gun steady. They were always gonna die, just like you are, though I'll make yours look like grief-induced suicide. Distraught daughter couldn't handle the betrayal? Tragic. Movement behind him caught my eye. Detective Morgan silent as a shadow weapon drawn, but Chris must have sensed something because he started to turn. I reacted on instinct, hurling the tire iron at his head. It struck his shoulders, sending him stumbling. The gun fired bullets sparking off concrete inches from my head. NYPD dropped the weapon. Chris spun toward Morgan, raising the gun. 3 shots echoed through the garage. Chris crumpled red, spreading across his shirt. The gun clattered away as he fell. I rushed forward, some insane need to hear his last words driving me. But when I reached him, Chris was laughing, blood bubbling from his lips. Hey, stupid girl, he wheezed. You think you won? Check Bradley's calendar. Tonight was just the beginning. His eyes went vacant, taking his secrets to hell. Detective Morgan checked his pulse, shaking her head. He's gone. Are you hurt? No. I stared at the man who destroyed so many families, feeling nothing but hollow relief. Bradley's calendar, he said to check it. Morgan was already on her radio coordinating the scene, but I couldn't wait. I pulled up Bradley's synced calendar on my phone looking for tonight's date. One entry, Operation Clean Slate, 11 p.m., all targets. Detective, I showed her the screen. There are more murders planned for tonight. Her face went pale. The other families in our investigation, the ones we haven't contacted yet. He's cleaning house, eliminating witnesses. How many? 4 families, all with suspicious trust fund activity, all with elderly parents. She was already running for her car. We've got 2 hours to stop 4 murders. As police swarmed the garage, I stood over Christopher Lawson's body, understanding the full scope of his evil. He'd built a network of killers, taught them his methods, and now they were activating to destroy the evidence. Living evidence. Rose. Detective Morgan called from her car. I need you to access Bradley's email again. Find out who else is involved. We need names, addresses, anything. I ran for my car, knowing that somewhere in the city, 4 elderly couples were having their evening tea, unaware that death had been scheduled for 11 p.m. The house of cards was collapsing, but innocent people were trapped underneath. Time to see if the strong one could save them. The FBI's makeshift command center in Lower Manhattan buzzed with controlled chaos. 4 separate tactical teams prepared to deploy while I hunched over Bradley's laptop mining his emails for addresses. Detective Morgan coordinated with field units while her partner, Agent Rivera, mapped locations on a digital board. 3 addresses confirmed. I announced Voice Horse from Reading, the Walkers in Brooklyn Heights, the Stimsons on the Upper East Side, and the Nguyens in Forest Hills, still searching for the 4th. Morgan checked her watch, 9:47 p.m. 73 minutes. Teams Alpha and Beta, you're on Brooklyn and Manhattan. Charlie team takes Queens. She turned to me. We need that 4th address, Rose. I scrolled frantically through Bradley's correspondence with Uncle Chris. Then I found it hidden in a coded message. Package 4 delivers to the source. Full circle brings best returns. The source. I whispered, pieces clicking together. Oh, God, he means the original, the first victims. Who were the first? Rivera demanded. If Uncle Chris killed my grandparents 20 years ago, I pulled up old family documents on my phone. They lived in Westchester. Their best friends were the Andersons. Mom always said they were like family. They had keys to each other's houses, shared everything. Morgan was already pulling records. James and Dorothy Anderson Scarsdale, trust fund worth $4 million. Son Matthew, daughter Christina. Her face paled. Matthew Anderson has gambling debts, 3 bankruptcy filings, classic target profile. That's 4 blocks from where my grandparents died, I realized. Chris is recreating his first murder. Full circle. Delta Team Priority Dispatch to Scarsdale. Morgan barked into her radio. Need you there yesterday. An alert popped up on Bradley's laptop. New message in a hidden folder. Abort. Uncle's down. Scatter protocol. They know, Rivera cursed. Someone warned them about Chris. I thought fast. Let me respond. They don't know Bradley's been arrested yet. My fingers flew over the keyboard. False alarm. Uncle delayed but safe. Proceed as planned. Clean slate essential. We waited breathless. Then responses started coming in. Confirmed. Walker package delivering on schedule. Stimson ready? No changes. Nguyen proceeding. Anderson special delivery as requested. Morgan squeezed my shoulder. You just saved 4 families. All team suspects are proceeding. Intercept and arrest on site. These people are armed and planning murder. As the tactical teams deployed, I noticed something else in Bradley's files. A folder labeled Insurance. Inside were recordings, dozens of them. Bradley had secretly recorded his conversations with the other killers. Detective, he was building blackmail material. I said, opening the first file. Bradley's voice mixed with another man's discussing poison dosages like recipe ingredients. He recorded everything, names, methods, past murders. Play them all, Morgan ordered. We need evidence for convictions. The recordings painted a horrific picture. The network had 19 active members, all trained by Christopher Lawson. They shared techniques, traded advice on forging documents, even held annual meetings disguised as investment seminars. Each had killed at least once. Some had 5 or 6 elderly couples' deaths on their conscience. One recording made me pause. Bradley talking to someone named Marcus, not Chen, but Marcus Hoffman. The voice sounded young, uncertain. I can't do this anymore, Marcus was saying. Mrs. Patterson trusted me. She made me cookies last week. You're in too deep to quit, Bradley responded. Uncle Chris will kill you himself if you back out. Besides, think of the money. Her son doesn't visit, doesn't care. We're doing him a favor. But the way she looks at me, like I'm her own grandson. Then make it painless. Extra dose in her nighttime tea. She'll go to sleep and not wake up. Better than dying alone in some nursing home. I felt sick, but kept listening. Marcus never agreed, the recording cutting off with him saying he needed to think. I searched for more recordings with Marcus, finding one dated 3 days ago. I'm out, Marcus said firmly. Destroyed the thallium, told the Pattersons I was moving for work. You can't make me do this. Bradley's response was cold. You're right, I can't. But Uncle Chris can. You know what happened to Tommy Ung when he tried to leave? They found pieces of him in 4 different burrows. I'll go to the police. With what you think they'll believe you were forced, you've taken money, Marcus. You're as guilty as the rest of us. But fine run. See how far you get. I immediately searched for Marcus Hoffman, finding a recent address. Detective, we might have a witness. Marcus Hoffman tried to leave the network. Bradley threatened him. He could testify about the whole operation. Morgan grabbed Agent Martinez. Get a protection detail to this address now. If he's still alive, we need him secured. My phone rang. Sarah Martinez sounding breathless. Rose, I'm at the courthouse. Emergency injunction went through. All 3 mortgages frozen pending fraud investigation. But there's more. The banks found something. Oh, what? Safe deposit boxes. 14 of them in different banks, all rented by Bradley using fake IDs. The FBI is getting warrants now, but one bank manager peeked. They're full of cash, gold coins, and documents. The payoffs. Bradley had been stockpiling his cuts from the murders, preparing for his eventual escape. Any idea how much? Conservative estimate 10 million across all boxes. Blood money from 19 murders. I relayed this to Morgan, who immediately dispatched units to secure the boxes. Evidence and assets recovered in one sweep. 10:32 p.m., 42 minutes until the scheduled murders. Alpha team in position, crackled through the radio. Suspect approaching Walker residence. White male 30s carrying what appears to be a tea service. Beta team ready. Female suspect at service entrance of Stimson building has keys. Charlie team visual on suspect at Nguyen house. He's leaving. Suspect departing scene. Delta team no movement at Anderson residence. Lights are on, family appears to be home. Morgan frowned. Why are they aborting? I checked Bradley's laptop again. New messages flooding in. Compromised, scatter, clean phones, dark for 48. Someone else warned them, Rivera said. We've got a leak. But then I noticed something. The warnings were coming from inside the FBI system. The timestamp showed they originated 5 minutes before we'd even confirmed the addresses. It's not a leak, I realized. It's automated. Look, Bradley set up a dead man switch. If he didn't check in every 12 hours, the system sends abort codes. Can you stop it? Already on it. I accessed the system settings, finding the automated protocol, but as I tried to disable it, another message sent Phase 2 active, secondary targets authorized. Secondary targets. Morgan pulled up the network analysis. These bastards had backup victims. The radio erupted with chatter. Alpha team suspect dropped the T service and ran in pursuit. Beta team suspect fleeing in vehicle, requesting backup. Charlie team, we've lost visual on suspect. Delta team, wait, someone's approaching the Anderson house. It's not our suspect. It's a teenage girl. My blood ran cold. That's their granddaughter, Christina. She has keys. Oh God, what if they recruited family members? All teams exercise extreme caution, Morgan commanded. Suspects may include family members of victims. I pulled up more files, finding Bradley's recruitment notes. The network specifically targeted adult children and grandchildren with financial problems, gambling debts, or drug addictions. They'd turned families into weapons against themselves. Marcus Hoffman secured. Agent Martinez's voice cut through. He's alive, terrified, but alive. Says he'll testify about everything. One piece of good news in the chaos. I kept searching, finding more evidence of the network's reach. Bank employees who'd facilitated fraudulent loans, doctors who'd provided thallium prescriptions, lawyers who'd drafted predatory wills. The conspiracy touched every profession needed to steal and kill effectively. 10:58 p.m. All teams report, Morgan demanded. Alpha team suspect in custody, Walker's safe but shaken. Beta team suspect crashed vehicle but apprehended. Stimson's unharmed. Charlie team Nguyen's secure. Suspect still at large but family protected. Oh, Delta team. Static then. Situation complicated. Christina Anderson in house with grandparents. She's crying, says she was supposed to bring them special tea but couldn't do it. Requesting guidance. Morgan looked at me. Your call, Rose. She's technically complicit. I thought of Bradley, of how Uncle Chris had twisted him into a killer. She's a victim too. Secure her but treat her as a witness, not a suspect. The real criminals are the ones who recruited children to kill their own grandparents. As the clock struck 11:04, elderly couples sat safe in their homes, unaware how close death had come. The network's plan had failed, but the scope of their evil was still revealing itself. Detective Morgan said quietly, you saved 23 people tonight, 23 elderly victims who will see tomorrow because you didn't give up. But I was looking at a final email in Bradley's drafts never sent. Rose, if you're reading this, I'm probably dead or arrested. I know you hate me. I hate myself. But know this, Uncle Chris had plans for you too. You were supposed to be the 24th victim. He said you knew too much, investigated too deeply. I convinced him to wait until after Mom and Dad. My one decent act in 2 years of evil. I'm sorry. For everything. B. I closed the laptop, exhaustion hitting like a wave. My brother had saved my life even while destroying our parents. It didn't excuse anything, didn't diminish his crimes, but it added another layer to the tragedy. What now? I asked Morgan. Now we process 19 arrests, protect witnesses, and build cases that will put these killers away forever. She paused. And you go home, Rose. You've done enough for one night. But home was a house haunted by parents who died thinking I'd abandoned them. Home was evidence bags and crime scene tape. Home was a reminder of everything I'd lost. Actually, I said, I think I'll stay and help process evidence. These families deserve justice. All of them. Morgan smiled grimly. Your parents raised a fighter. They raised 2. I corrected, thinking of Bradley's drafted confession. One just chose the wrong side. As the night wore on and the network survivors were arrested one by one, I worked through evidence that would ensure justice for 19 families. The house of cards had fallen, but from its rubble we'd build something stronger. A case that would echo through legal history as the night family love conquered family greed. The secondary wave of arrests continued through dawn. By sunrise, the murder network that had terrorized elderly couples across 3 states was finished, and I was still standing the last Lawson left to restore our family name. The Homeland Plaza Hotel's basement felt like a tomb at 3 in the morning. I stood in the mechanical room, my hand trembling on the doorknob Bradley had told me about during his interrogation. Behind this door was evidence that could either save or damn him, recordings and documents he'd hidden from Uncle Chris. You sure about this? Detective Morgan asked through my earpiece. We could send in SWAT. He said only I would understand the password, I replied, entering the code Bradley had given me, Mom's birthday followed by the date of my high school graduation. The lock clicked open. The room beyond was a shrine to paranoia, walls covered in photos, documents, and red string connecting victims across the tri-state area. But it was the box on the table that made my heart stop, labeled RL Contingency. My initials, my contingency. Inside were surveillance photos of me spanning 2 years. At work, at the grocery store, visiting my parents. Detailed notes in Uncle Chris's handwriting, documenting my routines, my vulnerabilities, my trusted contacts. Plans for my murder outlined with clinical precision. Thallium too risky with R. One note read, too suspicious after parents. Suggest car accident like grandparents. Or suicide. Grief-stricken daughter. B resisting but will comply eventually. My legs gave out. I sank into a chair staring at evidence that I'd been hunted for 2 years without knowing it. Every family dinner, every hospital visit, every moment I'd spent caring for my parents while their killers planned my death. Rose, Morgan's voice in my ear, talk to me. He was going to kill me, I whispered. Bradley knew. He watched them plan my murder for 2 years. A laptop in the corner caught my attention. Bradley's backup system still logged in. I opened his video files, finding hundreds of recordings from hidden cameras. The folder labeled Insurance contained enough evidence to convict everyone involved. But it was the folder labeled Confessions that broke me. Bradley had recorded himself drunk and crying, talking to the camera like a confession booth, date after date of him struggling with what he'd become. Day 73, one began. Increased mom's dose today. She asked me to stay for dinner, made my favorite pot roast. I ate it knowing I'm killing her. What kind of monster does that? Another dated weeks later. Rose came by today. She looks exhausted. Uncle Chris wants to move on her soon, but I keep stalling. Told him she's too high profile at her firm. Truth is, I can't do it. I've taken everything from her. I can't take her life too. The final video was recorded the night before our parents died. Tomorrow it ends. Uncle Chris gave me something new. Says it'll be quick. Mom can barely walk anymore. Dad pretends he doesn't know, but I see how he looks at me. They know. They both know. And they're protecting Rose by staying quiet. Even poisoned, they're better parents than I am a son. We've got movement. Agent Rivera's voice crackled through the comm. 3 vehicles approaching your location. Tactical teams report similar activity at all network safe houses. The remaining network members were making their move, either fleeing or coming to destroy evidence. I grabbed an external drive, copying everything I could. How many hostiles? Morgan asked. 12 confirmed across 4 locations. They're coordinated. This isn't random. My phone buzzed. Unknown number blocked caller ID. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello, Rosemary. The voice was cultured, calm, and completely unfamiliar. I represent certain interests disappointed by recent developments. You've cost us considerable investment. Who is this? Someone who'd like to make you an offer. The network you've disrupted was merely one tentacle of a much larger organism. We have operations in 17 states, 43 cities. What you found is impressive, but ultimately insignificant. You're the money behind this, the one funding Christopher's murder network. Christopher was a useful tool, nothing more. Crude but effective. You, however, show promise. Your forensic skills, your determination, your ability to turn your brother's weapons against him. Quite impressive. If you're offering me a job, I'll pass. A dry chuckle. Not a job, a trade. Walk away now. Take the $2 million from your parents' estate and live your life. In exchange, you forget what you've learned. No testimony, no further investigation. Everyone wins. Everyone except the families you'll keep murdering. People die, Ms. Lawson. We simply profit from the inevitable. Your parents were dying anyway. Cancer, heart disease. We merely accelerated nature's timeline. You're insane. I'm practical, and I'm offering you a choice Bradley never had. He was weak, driven by addiction. You're strong, driven by justice. But justice is expensive, and we have very deep pockets. How long before a judge dismisses charges on a technicality? How long before witnesses disappear or recant? How long before you have an accident like your grandparents? The threat hung in the air. Through the earpiece, I heard Morgan ordering trace protocols, but I knew they'd find nothing. people this powerful didn't make traceable calls. Counter-offer, I said, surprising myself with my steady voice. You turn yourself in, provide full disclosure of all operations, and maybe you get life instead of the death penalty. Brave words for someone alone in a basement. The voice hardened. Check the security monitors, Ms. Lawson. The hotel's security feeds showed 4 figures in the stairwell descending toward my floor. Professional movements, coordinated approach, not hotel security. Those are my negotiators, the voice continued. Former military, very efficient. You have 2 minutes to decide. Leave now with our gratitude and a comfortable future, or stay and join your parents. I looked at the evidence around me. 19 families destroyed, possibly hundreds more across the country. Bradley broken and turned into a weapon. My parents dying in fear and pain. Morgan, I said clearly, knowing she could hear. 4 hostiles approaching from the north stairwell. I'm barricading the door. Negative, get out now. Exit strategy alpha. But I was already shoving filing cabinets against the door. Can't. Too much evidence to leave. Besides, I addressed the phone again. You made a mistake calling me. This conversation is being recorded, and you just confessed to running a murder network. Thanks for the evidence. Silence, then. You're just like your grandmother. She thought she was untouchable, too. The line went dead. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. I grabbed the external drive, Bradley's laptop, and the most crucial documents, stuffing them into a bag. The mechanical room had another exit, through the maintenance tunnels Bradley had mapped. The door shook as someone tested it. Then the distinctive sound of lockpicks. These weren't amateurs. I fled into the tunnels, following Bradley's hand-drawn maps. Behind me, I heard the door crash open and surprised curses when they found the room empty. Emergency lights cast eerie shadows as I ran through passages that connected to the subway system. Rose, where are you? Morgan's voice tense with worry. Oh, maintenance tunnel B7 heading for the Bleecker Street station. I could hear pursuit, now professional and quick. Evidence secured, 4 hostiles in pursuit. Backup converging on your location, 2 minutes out. 2 minutes was forever in a tunnel with killers behind me. I reached a junction, Bradley's map, showing 3 options, but he'd marked one path with a red X and the note, Chris's trap. I heard my pursuers reach the junction, discussing which path to take. Making a desperate choice, I threw the bag down the safe path, making sure it scraped loudly. Then I slipped into the trapped passage, pressing myself against the wall. They took the bait, 3 of them rushing after the bag's sound. The 4th hesitated at the junction, professional instincts warning him. He started toward my passage. Then the trap Bradley had warned about triggered for the others. A deafening crash as rusted support beams gave way, decades-old construction finally failing. Screams echoed through the tunnels, followed by a cloud of dust and debris. The 4th pursuer spun toward his trapped teammates, giving me the opening I needed. I burst from hiding, swinging a piece of rebar I'd grabbed. He dodged incredibly fast, but the blow caught his shoulder. We grappled in the narrow passage, his superior training against my desperate fury. NYPD, nobody move. Tactical lights flooded the tunnel. Detective Morgan and a SWAT team surrounded us. The pursuer immediately raised his hands, professional enough to know when he was beaten. As they cuffed him, Morgan helped me stand. The others, trapped in a collapse. Bradley marked it as dangerous. I was shaking now, adrenaline fading. The evidence is down that passage. We'll get it. You're safe now. But I wasn't. None of us were. The voice on the phone had made that clear. The network we destroyed was part of something bigger, a cancer in the American family structure that turned love into profit. Hours later, in the FBI safe house, I sat with Agent Rivera reviewing what we'd recovered. The scope was staggering. Insurance policies on elderly parents, trust drained through elaborate schemes, nursing homes that expedited deaths for kickbacks, an industry of inherited murder. We need to go public, I said. Warn families, expose the patterns. The Attorney General agrees. Tomorrow you'll testify before Congress about elder fraud and familial homicide. Your story could save thousands of lives. My phone rang. Sarah Martinez. Oh, Rose, I have news about the estate. The criminal forfeitures mean Bradley loses all inheritance rights. As the sole remaining heir, everything transfers to you. The house, the business, the recovered assets from the safe deposit boxes. Approximately 14 million in total. 14 million. Blood money built on my parents' suffering and 18 other families' tragedies. I thought of the voice on the phone offering me 2 million to walk away. Set up a foundation, I decided. The Lawson Family Justice Fund. Use it to investigate suspicious elderly deaths, provide resources for families fighting inheritance fraud. And Sarah, make sure the first grant goes to researching thallium detection in routine medical tests. That's beautiful, Rose. Your parents would be proud. Would they? They died believing I'd abandoned them, poisoned by their son while their daughter fought to save them. But maybe this was how I honored them, by ensuring no other parent died believing their child's love was a lie. Detective Morgan knocked, entering with a tablet. We've identified your caller, Vincent Chen, hedge fund billionaire with connections to organized crime, runs a company that buys life insurance policies from elderly people at pennies on the dollar. He's profiting from murder on an industrial scale. And now we can prove it. Your recorded conversation plus Bradley's evidence gives us enough for warrants. We're going to dismantle his entire operation. I looked at my parents' photo on the table. Mom's warm smile, Dad's protective arm around her. They'd loved me even as poison clouded their minds, even as Bradley whispered lies in their ears. Love that strong deserved justice, equally powerful. Then let's finish what Bradley started when he began recording evidence, I said. He was a monster, but even monsters can accidentally do good. Use his files to burn down every murder network from here to California. The hunt was over. The war for justice had just begun. The federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan had never seen a crowd like this. Families of victims lined the steps, holding photos of their murdered parents and grandparents. Media from around the world focused their cameras on the woman who'd exposed the largest elder murder conspiracy in American history. I stood at the defendant's table, not as the accused, but as the lead witness in United States versus Chen et al. Across the aisle sat Vincent Chen and 43 co-defendants, their army of $1,000 an hour lawyers, unable to hide their client's fear. The prosecution calls Rosemary Lawson, Assistant U.S. Attorney Maria Rodriguez announced. As I took the witness stand, Bradley watched from the secure video link at Rikers Island. He'd agreed to testify in exchange for life without parole instead of the death penalty, a deal I'd supported knowing our parents wouldn't want their son executed, even for murdering them. Ms. Lawson, Rodriguez began, please tell the court how you discovered this conspiracy. For the next 3 hours, I laid out everything. The will reading that started it all. Bradley's confession about the phone intercepts, the forged signatures draining my trust fund, the thallium poisoning documented in my mother's hidden evidence. By the time I described finding Uncle Chris's murder plans for me, several jurors were crying. And what was the total scope of this network? Rodriguez asked. Based on recovered evidence, we've confirmed 137 elderly victims across 12 states over 20 years. I said, my voice steady despite the horror of the numbers. Total stolen assets exceed $400 million. Chen's lead attorney, the infamous Martin Sterling, stood for cross-examination. Ms. Lawson, isn't it true you stand to gain financially from these proceedings? I've already gained 14 million from my parents' estate, I replied calmly. Every penny is going to the Lawson Family Justice Fund to prevent future murders. How convenient. And isn't it true you illegally accessed private property to obtain evidence? I accessed property as the court-appointed executor. Every piece of evidence was legally obtained and properly documented. Sterling tried for 2 hours to break me, but Sarah Martinez had prepared me well. Every accusation fell flat against the mountain of evidence. When he finally sat down, frustrated, Rodriguez stood for redirect. One final question, Ms. Lawson. The defense claims this was merely aggressive estate planning, not murder. How do you respond? I turned to look directly at Chen and his co-conspirators. Aggressive estate planning doesn't require thallium sulfate. It doesn't need forged suicide notes or staged accidents. And it certainly doesn't involve detailed plans to murder witnesses who threatened to expose the truth. This wasn't business. It was serial killing for profit. As I stepped down, Bradley appeared on the video screen for his testimony. He looked haggard, aged 10 years in the months since his arrest, but his voice was clear as he began to detail the network's operations. Christopher Lawson recruited me 5 years ago, he said. I owed money to the wrong people and he offered a solution. He said our parents were dying anyway, that we were just accelerating the inevitable for everyone's benefit. Did you believe that? Rodriguez asked. I wanted to, Bradley's voice cracked, but watching my mother's hair fall out, seeing my father struggle to walk, I knew I was killing them. Chris provided the thallium, the forged documents, the connections to corrupt banks and lawyers. All I had to do was poison my parents' food and convince them Rose had abandoned them. Why involve your sister at all? Bradley looked directly at the camera as if he could see me through it. Because Chris wanted her dead too. She was too smart, too persistent. She'd already noticed discrepancies in our parents' finances. The plan was to kill them, then make Rose's death look like grief-induced suicide, but I kept stalling. Why? Because despite everything I'd become, I couldn't kill my sister. She was the only good thing left in our family. Even as I destroyed her life, she never stopped trying to save our parents, never stopped being the daughter I should have been. Chen's lawyer objected repeatedly, but Bradley continued outlining the entire network. The monthly meetings disguised as investment seminars, the medical professionals who provided poison, the financial advisors who identified vulnerable targets, the lawyers who drafted predatory documents. Vincent Chen wasn't just funding us, Bradley revealed. He was harvesting us. Every murder created insurance payouts, estate sales, and liquidated assets that flowed through his hedge fund. He'd buy policies and properties at massive discounts from desperate heirs, then flip them for huge profits. The murders were just the beginning of his profit chain. During a break, Marcus Hoffman approached me in the hallway. The young man who'd refused to kill Mrs. Patterson looked haunted, but determined. Thank you for saving me, he said quietly. When the FBI showed up, I thought I was being arrested. Instead, they protected me from Chen's enforcers. You saved yourself by refusing to kill, I corrected. That took more courage than anything I did. I've been thinking, Marcus said, about the others like me. Young people pressured into this nightmare. What if we created a support system, counseling, legal help, a way out before they cross the line? The foundation would fund that. I agreed immediately. Prevention is better than prosecution. As the trial resumed, witness after witness painted a picture of systematic evil. Jennifer Martinez, the actress who'd impersonated me, testified through tears about the scripts she'd been given. Bank executives admitted to processing clearly fraudulent documents for bribes. Doctors confessed to providing poison prescriptions. But it was the testimony of Christina Anderson, the teenager who'd nearly poisoned her grandparents, that broke the courtroom's composure. They said Grandma and Grandpa were suffering, she sobbed. That their medical bills were destroying our family's future. They made it sound like mercy, but when I stood in their kitchen with the poisoned tea, all I could think about was how Grandma taught me to bake cookies in that same spot. I couldn't do it. What happened when you refused? Rodriguez asked gently. The man training me said I was weak, that I'd regret it when we lost the house. But I didn't care. I threw the tea down the sink and told my grandparents everything. They didn't even seem surprised. Grandpa just hugged me and said he was proud of me for being strong enough to say no. By day 5 of testimony, the government had presented evidence of 137 confirmed murders, 89 attempted murders prevented by our investigation, $426 million in stolen assets, 23 states with active cells, 197 individuals involved at various levels. Chen's defense team made a fatal error on day 6. They called a surprise witness, Dr. Harold Morrison, who claimed the thallium levels in victims were from environmental exposure, not poisoning. Rodriguez smiled. Dr. Morrison, are you familiar with the Lawson case specifically? I've reviewed the toxicology reports. All of them. She produced a stack of documents. Because Mrs. Diane Lawson collected hair samples over 6 months, showing progressive increases in thallium concentration. Can environmental exposure explain exponential growth in toxin levels? Morrison fumbled for an answer, but Rodriguez wasn't done. She presented Morrison's bank records showing deposits from Chen's shell companies totaling $200,000. You were paid to provide medical cover for murderers, weren't you? Morrison took the fifth, but the damage was done. Chen's defense unraveled like a cheap sweater, each thread pulling loose, revealing more corruption beneath. On day 7, something unexpected happened. Vincent Chen himself asked to address the court. Your Honor, he said, standing despite his lawyer's attempts to stop him, I'd like to make a statement. Judge Harrison, who'd overseen the proceedings with iron control, nodded. Proceed, Mr. Chen. I built an empire on a simple observation. Families are economic units and death is a transaction. I didn't invent elder abuse or inheritance fraud. I simply systematized it, made it efficient. Every family in this courtroom has members who've wished their elderly relatives would die faster. I just facilitated natural selection. Gasps echoed through the gallery. Several victim family members had to be restrained. I felt rage building but forced myself to remain calm. Chen continued, Ms. Lawson speaks of justice, but she profited too. $14 million for being the last one standing. How is she different from her brother except in methodology? I stood unable to remain silent. Your Honor, may I respond? This is highly irregular, Judge Harrison noted, but I'll allow it. I faced Chen directly. The difference is love. You see families as economic units, but they're not. They're people bound by something you'll never understand. The willingness to sacrifice for each other. My parents died protecting me from Bradley's lies because love endured even through poison. Every family you destroyed had that same love, and you perverted it into a weapon. That's not natural selection. That's evil wearing the mask of capitalism. Pretty words, Chen sneered. But your brother understood the truth. Family is just shared DNA and joint bank accounts. Love is the lie we tell ourselves to justify inheritance claims. Then, explain Christina Anderson, I challenged. No inheritance at stake, just a teenager who threw away poison tea because she loved her grandparents more than money. Explain Marcus Hoffman, who walked away from promised wealth because Mrs. Patterson's cookies meant more than cash. Explain my mother collecting evidence while dying because she loved truth more than life. Sentiment, Chen dismissed. Weakness. No, strength. The kind you'll never understand because it can't be bought, sold, or stolen. It's what will convict you because every juror knows the difference between love and greed, even if you don't. Judge Harrison called for order, but the damage to Chen's defense was complete. His sociopathic worldview laid bare horrified everyone who heard it. His own lawyers looked disgusted. The prosecution rested on day 8. The defense, their strategy in ruins, presented only character witnesses for the lower-level conspirators trying to salvage what they could. Closing arguments brought everything full circle. Rodriguez stood before the jury holding photos of all 137 confirmed victims. These aren't just photographs, she said. They're parents who raised children, grandparents who spoiled grandchildren, people who loved and were loved. The defendants reduced them to dollar signs, murdered them for money, and felt justified because they were old. But age doesn't diminish humanity. Gray hair doesn't reduce the right to life, and family bonds aren't ATM access codes. Sterling made one last attempt in his closing, arguing that the government had overreached, that business decisions weren't murder, that his clients were scapegoats for society's treatment of the elderly. But when he sat down, the jury's faces showed he'd failed. They'd heard too much, seen too much evidence of calculated evil dressed up as commerce. During jury deliberations, I sat with other victims' families. We shared stories, tears, and something unexpected: hope. The Lawson Family Justice Fund had already received millions in donations. Legislation named for my parents was moving through Congress, requiring enhanced screening for elder financial abuse. "Your parents would be so proud," Mrs. Walker said, holding my hand. "She'd nearly died from poisoned tea, but survived thanks to our intervention. You turned their tragedy into triumph." After 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned 193 guilty verdicts across all defendants. Vincent Chen guilty on all charges, including conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering money, laundering, and wire fraud. Sentenced life without parole. As marshals led Chen away, he passed our table. "This isn't over," he hissed. "I have friends, resources. You'll spend your life looking over your shoulder." "Maybe," I replied calmly, "but you'll spend yours in a cell remembering that love beat greed. That's justice." Bradley appeared on the video screen one last time as his sentence was read, life without parole as agreed. As the judge pronounced judgment, he looked at me through the camera. "I'm sorry," he mouthed silently, "for everything." I nodded once. Forgiveness would take time, maybe forever, but acknowledgement of wrong was a start. Outside the courthouse, hundreds of families celebrated justice. The murder network that had terrorized elderly Americans for 2 decades was finished. Chen's financial empire was being dismantled, its assets distributed to victims' families. "What now?" Detective Morgan asked, standing beside me on the courthouse steps. "Now we build something better," I said, looking at the crowd of families, brought together by tragedy, but bonded by justice. "The foundation will make sure no family goes through what ours did. We'll teach the signs, fund investigations, and show that inheritance should flow from love, not murder." And Bradley, I thought about my brother beginning his life sentence. He'll testify in the remaining state trials, help us find any cells we missed. It doesn't absolve him, but maybe it starts balancing the scales. As evening fell over Manhattan, I stood where this journey began, in Attorney Fitzgerald's office. He'd asked to see me after the verdicts. "Your parents updated their will one more time," he said, handing me an envelope dated 2 weeks before their deaths. "They asked me to hold this until after any trials were complete." Inside a letter in Mom's shaky handwriting. "Dearest Rose, if you're reading this, then you've discovered the truth about Bradley. We've known for months what he was doing, but proving it would have destroyed him and you. So, we made a choice. We changed our will to give him everything because we knew you'd fight. You'd investigate. You'd find justice, not just for us, but for others. Bradley has our money, but you have our values. One is temporary, the other is eternal. We're sorry for the pain this caused. Sorry you had to hear those awful phone calls and think we believed them. We never did. Every cruel word from that actress pretending to be you only reminded us how much the real you loved us. Bradley is sick, baby. Uncle Chris broke him like he tried to break your father years ago. But you're strong. Stronger than all of them. Use that strength to save others. We love you forever and completely, not because you're successful or independent, but because you're you, our daughter, our pride, our legacy. Don't let Bradley die alone in prison. He's still your brother, still our son. Broken things can sometimes be mended, even if they're never quite the same. All our love, Mom and Dad. P.S. Check the attic. We hid something for you where Bradley would never look, inside your old violin case. I drove to the house now mine, but feeling emptier than ever. In the attic, dusty and forgotten, sat my violin case from high school. Inside, wrapped in velvet, were my grandmother's pearls and a bank book for an account I'd never seen. $5 million. The insurance policy Dad mentioned in his letter. Untouched by Bradley, unknown to Chen, waiting patiently for justice to be served. I held the pearls up to the light, remembering Grandma wearing them to Sunday dinners. She died in a car accident that wasn't an accident, killed by the brother who taught my brother to kill, but her granddaughter had broken the cycle. My phone rang. Sarah Martinez. Rose, I have updates on the foundation. We've received over 50 million in donations just today. Families want to help. Politicians are calling for congressional hearings. You've started something incredible. We've started something, I corrected. This isn't about me. It's about every family protecting each other from predators who see love as weakness. As I stood in my childhood home surrounded by ghosts and memories, I made a decision. The house would become the first Lawson Center for Elder Protection, offering resources for families suspecting abuse. My parents' death would give life to countless others. The network was unraveled, the killers were caged, but the work of rebuilding had just begun. And somewhere in Rikers Island, my brother waited for a visit I'd eventually make. Because Mom was right. Broken things could sometimes be mended, even if they were never quite the same. The strong one had won. Now came the harder task, learning to forgive. The congressional hearing room felt like a coliseum with senators arranged in their elevated semicircle and cameras capturing every moment for history. I sat at the witness table, the weight of 137 murdered souls pressing on my shoulders as I prepared to testify before the Senate Special Committee on Elder Fraud and Abuse. Ms. Lawson, committee chair, Senator Patricia Williams began, her voice echoing through the marble chamber. You've uncovered the largest elder murder conspiracy in American history. Help us understand how this happened under our noses for 20 years. I leaned into the microphone, my voice steady, despite the magnitude of the moment. Senator, it happened because we've created a society where inheriting money is seen as more natural than caring for aging parents, where nursing homes warehouse our elderly like inventory, where family gatherings become scouting missions for valuable assets. Vincent Chen didn't create this mindset. He simply weaponized it. Are you saying society is to blame for these murders? Senator Richards from Texas interjected, his tone skeptical. I'm saying we enabled them through indifference. When's the last time any of us questioned why an elderly neighbor suddenly disappeared into a care facility? Why a grieving child immediately liquidated their parents' assets? We've normalized the disposal of our elderly, and predators like Chen exploited that normalization. The hearing had been called after public outcry following the trial. Families across America were discovering suspicious deaths, questionable will changes, and mysterious illnesses in their own histories. The Lawson Family Justice Fund had received over 3,000 requests for investigation in just 2 weeks. Walk us through the network's methodology, Senator Williams requested. I pulled up the presentation Sarah and I had prepared. The process had 7 stages. First, identification. Financial advisors, healthcare workers, and social services would flag elderly targets with significant assets and vulnerable family members. Second, recruitment. They'd approach adult children or grandchildren with financial problems, offering solutions. Third, training, teaching them how to administer poison, gradually forge documents, and manipulate their victims emotionally. This training, Senator Johnson from California interrupted. How sophisticated was it? Extremely. We recovered training manuals that read like business textbooks, chapters on optimal thallium dosing, psychological manipulation techniques, how to cry convincingly at funerals. They even had worksheets for calculating inheritance tax implications. Gasps rippled through the gallery. I continued. Fourth, isolation, separating victims from support networks. Fifth, execution, the actual poisoning and document forgery. Sixth, liquidation, quickly converting assets to cash. And seventh, distribution, funneling money through Chen's network of shell companies. How many people knew about this? Senator Williams asked. Based on recovered documents, at least 400 people had some knowledge of the network. Not all were killers. Some just looked the other way for bribes, bank managers who approved suspicious loans, doctors who didn't question unusual symptoms, lawyers who notarized forged documents without proper verification. And they all just participated in murder. Senator Richards sounded genuinely disturbed. They participated in compartmentalized crimes. The banker thought he was just bending rules for a commission. The doctor assumed the family was exaggerating symptoms. The lawyer figured the documents were legitimate. Chen's genius was keeping people focused on their small part while he orchestrated the whole. Senator Johnson leaned forward. Ms. Lawson, your brother Bradley testified that you were supposed to be victim number 138. Can you speak to that? The question I dreaded but expected. My uncle Christopher had extensive surveillance on me for 2 years. Photos, schedules, psychological profiles. The plan was to make my death look like suicide after my parents died. The grieving daughter who couldn't handle the loss. Bradley kept delaying it until his arrest made it impossible. What, do you believe your brother saved your life? I paused, choosing my words carefully. I believe Bradley retained enough humanity to resist killing his sister, even while poisoning our parents. It doesn't excuse his crimes, but it shows even monsters have limits. Speaking of monsters, Senator Williams said Vincent Chen's statement at trial was chilling. He viewed families as economic units. How widespread is this thinking? More than we'd like to admit. During our investigation, we found online forums where people casually discussed elderly parents as financial burdens, jokes about inheritance timing, discussions about the cost-benefit analysis of care versus neglect. Chen didn't create this darkness. He organized it. The committee's counsel approached with a stack of documents. Ms. Lawson, these are copies of legislation being proposed in 37 states based on your case. The Lawson laws, they're being called. Mandatory toxicology screening for elderly deaths. Enhanced penalties for elder financial abuse. Required waiting periods for major asset transfers after deaths. Do you support these measures? I support anything that makes families think twice before viewing their elders as ATMs. But laws alone won't solve this. We need cultural change. We need to value our elderly for their wisdom, not their wallets. You've established the Lawson Family Justice Fund with your entire inheritance, Senator Richards noted. $14 million plus donations now exceeding $70 million. What's your vision? 3 pillars, I explained. First, investigation support for families suspecting elder abuse. Second, prevention education for both elderly and their families. Third, survivor support for those who've lost family to these crimes. We're not just catching killers. We're rebuilding families. Critics say you're profiting from tragedy, Senator Johnson said. Book deals, movie rights, speaking fees. Every penny goes to the foundation. I take a $1 annual salary. My profit is seeing families protected. My dividend is knowing no other daughter will find her parents dead from poison, while their son counts inherited money. The hearing continued for hours. I presented evidence of similar networks in Europe and Asia, showing this was a global phenomenon. Medical experts testified about thallium detection. Financial analysts explained how to spot suspicious transfers. Psychologists described the grooming process that turned loving children into killers. But it was the testimony of Eleanor Patterson that changed everything. "My name is Eleanor Patterson," the elderly woman said, her voice strong despite her 83 years. "Marcus Hoffman was assigned to kill me. He spent 6 months gaining my trust, eating my cookies, listening to my stories. He was supposed to poison my tea." The room held its breath. But he didn't. This young man, caught in an evil system, chose love over money. He threw away the poison and confessed everything. Thanks to him, I'm alive to see my great-grandchildren. Thanks to Ms. Lawson's investigation, Marcus is free from that network. Evil exists, yes, but good is stronger when we stand together. During a break, my phone buzzed with a message from Detective Morgan. "Bradley's been attacked in prison. He's alive but in protective custody. Chen's people." My blood ran cold. Despite everything, he was still my brother. I texted back, "How bad?" "Stabbed twice. He'll recover. He's asking for you." I looked at the committee room at the work still to be done, then made a decision. "Tell him I'll visit tomorrow." The afternoon session focused on prevention strategies. I presented the Foundation's early warning system, an AI algorithm that detected patterns in financial records, medical reports, and family dynamics that preceded elder murders. Already, it had flagged 300 potential cases for investigation. "Now this feels like surveillance," Senator Richards objected. "Big Brother watching families." "It's pattern recognition saving lives," I countered, "the same way credit card companies detect fraud. Would you rather preserve privacy or prevent murders?" "You're asking us to choose between freedom and safety." "I'm asking you to choose between denial and action. Every senator in this room has elderly parents or grandparents. Any of them could be targeted tomorrow by the next Vincent Chen. Do you want to maintain ignorance or save lives?" The committee struggled with the balance, but public opinion was clear. Polling showed 87% of Americans supported enhanced monitoring for elder protection. The Lawson laws were gaining momentum in every state. As the hearing concluded, Senator Williams asked one final question. "Ms. Lawson, you've lost your parents, your brother's in prison for life, your uncle died trying to kill you. How do you move forward from such devastating family destruction?" I thought of Mom's letter of the pearls around my neck, of the thousands of families we'd already helped. By redefining family senator, blood made Bradley my brother, but choice makes the Foundation my family. Every life we save, every elder, we protect, every family we keep whole, they're all Lawsons now. My parents died alone, but their legacy lives in multitudes. Thank you for your testimony and your service, Ms. Lawson. This committee recommends full federal adoption of the Lawson laws. As I left the Capitol, protesters lined the steps. But they weren't protesting against me. They held signs reading, "Justice for Grandma," and "Protect our elders," and "Love over greed." The movement had grown beyond our tragedy into something national. At the bottom of the steps, Jennifer Martinez waited. The actress who'd impersonated me to torment my dying mother had become one of the Foundation's most passionate advocates. "How did it go?" she asked anxiously. "They're recommending federal adoption. Every state will have to implement protections." Tears filled her eyes. "I'll never forgive myself for those phone calls, but maybe this helps balance the scales." "You testified against Chen. You've spoken at dozens of prevention seminars. The scales are balancing, Jennifer." My phone rang. Sarah Martinez, no relation to Jennifer, despite the shared surname. "Rose, urgent news. The Foundation's investigation team found something in Ohio. 15 suspicious deaths over 10 years, all connected to a retirement community. Same pattern as Chen's network." My heart sank. We destroyed one network only to discover others. How many more are out there? "Based on our analysis, dozens, maybe hundreds. Chen was the biggest, but he wasn't alone. Copycats, competitors, parallel operations. We've opened Pandora's box." "Then we keep fighting. Send me the Ohio files. I'll review them tonight." Rose, you can't personally investigate every case. You need to delegate build teams, trust others. She was right, but letting go felt like abandoning families who needed help. Still, the foundation had grown beyond what one person could manage. We had 40 investigators, 100 volunteers partnerships with law enforcement in 20 states. Fine, assign the Ohio case to Team 3, but I want daily updates. That evening, I stood in Arlington National Cemetery at my grandparents' graves. Now that I knew Uncle Chris had murdered them, their deaths felt fresh again. I placed flowers and whispered updates about the justice we'd achieved. A figure approached from behind. Marcus Hoffman, the young man who'd refused to kill Mrs. Patterson. I hope I'm not intruding, he said quietly. I wanted to thank you again. For saving my life, for giving me a second chance. You saved yourself by choosing conscience over cash. How's the counseling program going? Marcus had become our lead coordinator for preventing recruitment of young people into murder networks. 17 interventions this month, kids approached by uncles' aunts, even parents to help ease suffering. We're teaching them to recognize manipulation report approaches resist pressure. Good. Every person we prevent from becoming a killer saves multiple lives, their victims and their own soul. We stood in comfortable silence, both processing how tragedy had transformed into purpose. Then Marcus said something that stopped my heart. Ms. Lawson, I need to tell you something about Christopher. He didn't just teach killing techniques. He was building something bigger. What do you mean? Before he died, he mentioned Phase 3. Chen's network was Phase 2. Phase 1 was your grandparents and the early murders. But Phase 3, he called it inheritance industrialization, making elder murder as common and accepted as divorce. The implications chilled me. We'd stopped a network, but someone was planning to make that network look small. Do you know anything specific? Just fragments from training sessions. Something about political connections legislation that would make inheritance easier, reduce oversight. He said by 2030, natural death would be the exception, not the rule for wealthy elderly. I immediately called Detective Morgan. We need to meet, tonight. Marcus has information about something bigger than Chen. 3 hours later, we sat in a secure FBI conference room as Marcus detailed everything he remembered about Phase 3. The scope was terrifying. Lobbying for legislation that reduced autopsy requirements, infiltrating hospice organizations, corrupting medical examiner offices. They're not just killing individuals, Agent Rivera said, horror creeping into his voice. They're trying to normalize systemic elder termination. Like a financial final solution. I said the comparison making everyone uncomfortable but accurate. Instead of ethnic cleansing, it's age cleansing. Anyone over 70 with assets becomes a target. Chen must have known about this, Morgan said, his comment about being one tentacle of a larger organism. We need to find who's running Phase 3 before they activate, Rivera decided. Rose, the foundation, has resources we don't. Private sector flexibility. Can you investigate parallel to our official efforts? Gus. Already planning it. Marcus, I want you leading a task force within the foundation. Find others who heard about Phase 3. Map connections. Follow money. Someone's funding this and they're not hiding in shadows anymore. As the meeting broke up, Morgan pulled me aside. You're scheduled to visit Bradley tomorrow, still planning to go. He's my brother. Broken murderous, but still my brother. Mom asked me not to let him die alone in prison. I won't abandon him like he made our parents think I did. Be careful. Prison changes people, and Chen's reach extends inside. I know, but Bradley has information we need. About Christopher, about Phase 3. He might be our best source for preventing what's coming. That night, I couldn't sleep. The congressional victory felt hollow knowing larger threats loomed. I reviewed Ohio case files, seeing the same patterns. Thallium-forged documents, sudden deaths after will changes. The cancer was metastasizing faster than we could cut it out. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You think you've won. Chen was small. Phase 3 makes him look like amateur hour. Stop now or join your parents. This is your only warning. I screenshot the message, forwarded it to the FBI, then responded, My parents died thinking I abandoned them. I won't abandon others to the same fate. Come at me. If you must, I'll be ready. No response came, but I knew the threat was real. The Lawson-Laws would pass, the foundation would grow, but somewhere in the shadows, architects of Phase 3 were planning industrial-scale murder. Tomorrow, I'd face my brother in prison, looking for answers. Tonight, I sat surrounded by evidence of humanity's darkest impulses, finding hope in Marcus's refusal to kill, in Jennifer's redemption, in thousands of families now protected by our work. The strong one, Mom had called me. Time to prove strength meant more than surviving. It meant standing guard against the darkness, no matter how deep it ran. The visitor's room at Rikers Island felt like a tomb made of reinforced glass and desperation. Bradley sat across from me, his orange jumpsuit hanging loose on his diminished frame. The attack had left him with a scar across his left cheek and a tremor in his hands that made him look decades older than his 35 years. You came, he said, voice hoarse with disuse. Mom asked me not to let you die alone. I kept my tone neutral, professional, though it seems Chen's people are trying to make that happen sooner rather than later. Bradley touched his scar reflexively. 2 guys in the shower. Would have succeeded if another inmate hadn't intervened. Turns out the man I was supposed to kill his son is doing 25 to life here. He remembered Dad from the electronics business, back when things were honest. Said he couldn't let Mr. Lawson's son die like that. Irony. The son of your intended victim saved you. I know. I think about it every night. He leaned forward, chains rattling. Rose, I need to tell you about Phase 3. My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression blank. The room was monitored, recorded. Tell me about Christopher first. Start from the beginning. Bradley's eyes darted to the cameras, then back to me. Uncle Chris approached me 5 years ago, right after I lost big in Atlantic City. I owed the Torino family $300,000. They were going to kill me. Then this ghost from Dad's past shows up, offers to pay my debts if I help with the family business. You knew he killed Grandma and Grandpa. Not at first. He told me that story later, like he was proud. Said they were going to cut him out of the will for being unstable. He made it look like brake failure collected his inheritance, then disappeared for 20 years perfecting his methods. Perfecting murder. He called it estate optimization. Had this whole philosophy about natural selection in families. The strong consume the weak, resources flow to those who deserve them. He made it sound logical. Sociopaths often do. What about Mom and Dad? Bradley's tremor worsened. Chris had been watching them for years. Knew about Mom's heart condition, Dad's diabetes. He said they were already dying slowly. We'd be doing them a favor by making it quick. The thallium was supposed to be painless. It wasn't. I saw them suffer for 7 months while you poisoned their food and destroyed their faith in me. I know. Tears ran down his scarred cheek. I see Mom's face every time I close my eyes. Hear her crying after those phone calls. The actress Jennifer. She was too good. Mom believed every word. Why destroy their faith in me specifically? Chris insisted. Said you were the biggest threat to the operation. Too smart, too persistent. If Mom and Dad trusted you completely, you'd notice the poisoning symptoms faster. We had to isolate you, make them doubt your motives. The inheritance was just a cover story. But the real plan was to kill me too. Bradley nodded miserably. After they died, you were supposed to commit suicide from grief and guilt. Chris had this whole psychological profile on you, how you'd blame yourself for not being there, for letting them die, thinking you'd abandon them. He said the guilt would eat you alive, make suicide seem logical. He underestimated me. No, I sabotaged him, kept finding excuses to delay, told him you were too high profile at work that your death would trigger investigation. Really, I just couldn't. You're my sister. even after everything I'd become that still meant something. I studied his broken face, searching for deception, but finding only regret. Tell me about Phase 3. Bradley glanced at the cameras again, then pulled out a small piece of paper covered in tiny writing. I've been documenting everything I remember. They search cells constantly, but I've hidden copies everywhere. He slid the paper across the table. In his cramped handwriting, I read names, dates, connections that made my blood run cold. Phase 3 wasn't just about murder. It was about legislation, medical protocols, insurance reforms, a complete restructuring of how America handled aging and inheritance. See, Senator Richardson from Texas, I read aloud. He's on the committee that questioned me yesterday. Bought and paid for. He's pushing legislation to reduce autopsy requirements for deaths over 70. Says it's about reducing government spending and family trauma. Really, it's about making murder invisible. Dr. Patricia Helmsurgeon, general nominee. Asais, Sankhasemkix. She's developed new end-of-life protocols that make poisoning symptoms look like natural decline. Calls it compassionate transition assistance. Several states are already adopting her guidelines. Each name was a pillar of respectability, hiding monstrous intent. Judges who'd rule favorably on contested wills, insurance executives who'd expedite payouts, medical examiners who'd sign death certificates without investigation. How many people are involved? At the highest level, maybe 50, but they're influencing thousands who don't know the real agenda. Well-meaning people who think they're reforming healthcare and inheritance law. Who's running it? Who replaced Christopher? Bradley shook his head. Chris never told me. Said it was safer if the cells didn't know about each other, but he mentioned someone called the architect. Said they'd been planning Phase 3 for 30 years long before Chris even started killing. 30 years that predates even Grandma and Grandpa's deaths. The architect sees generations ahead. Chris was just implementing Stage 1 of a master plan. Chen ran Stage 2. Stage 3 is the endgame. Complete normalization of inheritance acceleration. A guard knocked, signaling 5 minutes remaining. Bradley spoke faster. Rose, there's something else. The attack on me wasn't just revenge for testifying. They wanted to silence me before I could tell you about Chicago. What's in Chicago? November 15th through 18th. The American Healthcare and Inheritance Reform Summit. 1,500 attendees, including legislators, healthcare executives, insurance leaders. On the surface, it's about modernizing elder care. Really, it's the Phase 3 launch event. That's in 3 weeks. They're going to announce model legislation for nationwide adoption. Standards that make elder murder undetectable and unprosecutable. If even half the states adopt these reforms, we'll see thousands of deaths within the first year. The guard knocked again. 2 minutes. Bradley, I need everything you know, every name, every detail. I've written it all down, 20 pages hidden in my cell copies with my lawyer and one more set. He smiled grimly. Check Mom's grave. I had someone leave a package there. Waterproof container under the flowers I send every week. You send flowers? Lilies, her favorite. It doesn't absolve me, but I need her to know I remember. His chains rattled as he stood. Rose, be careful. The architect isn't like Chris or Chen. They're not motivated by money or philosophy. This is about power, reshaping society itself. They'll kill anyone who threatens that vision. Including you. Especially me. I'm a loose end who knows too much. The attack was just the first attempt, but I'm not afraid anymore. I'm already dead. I killed myself the moment I poisoned Mom's tea. This is just borrowed time to maybe do something right. As guards led him away, Bradley turned back. I love you, Rose. I know I've destroyed any right to say that, but it's true. You're the only clean thing left from our family. Don't let them dirty you too. Outside Rikers, I sat in my car processing everything. The Phase 3 conspiracy reached higher than we'd imagined. Senators, surgeons, generals, industry leaders, all working toward a future where murdering elderly parents became as routine as renewing driver's licenses. I called Detective Morgan. We need an emergency meeting. Bradley gave me names, big names. How big? Senate committee members, big. Presidential appointee, big. We're not fighting criminals anymore. We're fighting the system itself. Come to the federal building. Bring everything. And Rose, watch your back. If these names are real, you just became the most dangerous person in America to Phase 3. I drove to the cemetery first, finding Mom's grave covered in fresh lilies. Under the arrangement, exactly where Bradley said was a waterproof container with 20 pages of handwritten notes. Details about Phase 3 that made Chen's network look like a practice run. One passage stood out. The architect believes American wealth concentration in elderly hands is economically inefficient. Phase 3 will transfer $5 trillion from older to younger generations within a decade. They call it the Great Rebalancing. Murder as macroeconomic policy. At the federal building, I presented Bradley's intelligence to a room of increasingly pale federal agents. Morgan studied the summit details while Rivera cross-referenced the names with their databases. Oh, half these people are untouchable, Rivera said. Senator Richardson alone has connections to the president. Dr. Helm is testifying before Congress next week about health care reform. Then we make them touchable, I said. The foundation has resources. Private investigators, forensic accountants, data analysts will build cases so airtight that political protection becomes political poison. It's not enough, Morgan said. Even if we prove everything, they'll claim these are legitimate policy proposals. Murder hidden as reform is still just reform to voters who don't know the truth. Then we expose the truth, publicly, dramatically, at their own summit. Everyone stared at me. You want to infiltrate the Phase 3 launch event. Not infiltrate, attend. The Lawson Foundation is a major player in elder protection now. We'll register officially, attend openly, and document everything. When they unveil their murder manifesto disguised as reform, we'll be ready with counter evidence. That's suicide, Rivera protested. They'll know who you are. Good. Let them see me coming. Let them know Rosemary Lawson is sitting in their audience while they plan mass murder. See how comfortable they are presenting their reforms with their biggest enemy watching. Morgan considered this. It could work. They can't kill you publicly at your own summit. And if we wire you, document everything. I'll need a team. Security legal observers, medical experts who can decode their euphemisms. We'll attend every panel, every presentation, every cocktail party where they discuss turning America into a geriatric slaughterhouse. The foundation will fund it, Sarah Martinez said when I called her. Whatever you need, this is why we exist, to stop the next wave before it breaks. 3 weeks to prepare for the most important confrontation of my life. 3 weeks to build cases against 50 of America's most powerful people. 3 weeks to stop Phase 3 before it turned elder murder from exception to expectation. That night, I stood in my parents' kitchen cooking dinner in the place where Bradley had poisoned their food for 7 months. The irony wasn't lost on me, using the crime scene as my war room against future crimes. My phone rang. Unknown number, blocked ID. Ms. Lawson, a cultured female voice said, I represent concerned parties who've noticed your recent activities. Bradley's intelligence was outdated. The summit has been canceled. Then we'll find wherever you've moved it. There's no need for confrontation. We're not monsters like Chen or Christopher. We're reformers trying to solve America's demographic crisis. Surely you see the problem. Wealth concentrated in aging hands while young families struggle. We're simply proposing market-based solutions. Market-based murder is still murder. Such inflammatory language. No one's proposing murder, simply removing barriers to natural wealth transition, reducing artificial life extension that bankrupts families, allowing dignity in death rather than prolonged suffering. Pretty words for poisoning grandparents. A sigh. You're young, idealistic. You see evil where others see evolution. But consider this. Your parents suffered for months because Christopher was crude. Our reforms would ensure peaceful, painless transitions. No more thallium, no more suffering, just sleep. Administered by loving children, you've convinced its mercy. Administered by medical professionals following ethical guidelines. No more Bradley scenarios, no more family trauma, clean, clinical, compassionate. You're industrializing murder and calling it healthcare reform. We're acknowledging reality. Every family wishes secretly that their declining elders would pass peacefully rather than linger expensively. We're simply providing framework for those wishes. My family never wished that. Didn't they? Your father knew Bradley was poisoning him? Your mother collected evidence for months, yet they changed their will to give him everything. Why? Because part of them accepted it. Part of them was ready. They just needed permission. Rage flooded through me. They were protecting me from becoming a target. They sacrificed themselves rather than watch their children destroy each other. That's not acceptance. That's love you're too twisted to recognize. Love. She said it like a foreign word. Yes, Chen mentioned your fixation on that concept. Very well, Ms. Lawson. Attend the summit. Document our proposals. Share your love philosophy with 1,500 professionals focused on practical solutions. See how far sentiment gets you against statistics. Where and when? Oh, Chicago as planned. November 15th. The architect looks forward to meeting you. They've followed your career with interest. You're exactly the type of passionate opposition that validates our necessity. The line went dead. I stood in my murdered parents' kitchen knowing I'd just accepted an invitation to walk into the heart of darkness. But somewhere in Chicago, the architect waited with plans to murder millions. The strong one was going to war. I called Marcus Hoffman. Gather the team. We have 3 weeks to prepare for Chicago. 3 weeks to stop the future they're planning. What future is that? He asked. I looked at my parents' photo on the wall, thinking of the 1,500 professionals about to gather and plan genocide. One where love loses to ledgers, where families become corporations, where murder becomes medicine. They want to kill the concept of natural death itself. Then we stopped them. Yes, I agreed, fingering my grandmother's pearls. We stopped them, all of them, forever. The verdict was in on Chen's network. Now it was time to prevent the next verdict, one that would condemn every American elder to death by design. Chicago would be the battleground. The architect would be the enemy. And love that sentiment Chen mocked and Phase 3 dismissed would be our weapon. 3 weeks to save millions of grandparents. 3 weeks to preserve the sanctity of natural death. 3 weeks to prove the strong one could stop an entire system bent on turning murder into policy. The war for America's soul was about to begin. 6 months after Bradley's conviction, I stood in what was once my childhood home, now transformed into the Lawson Center for Elder Protection. Construction crews had finished the renovations, just in time for our grand opening. Where Bradley had poisoned our parents in the kitchen, we'd built a resource library. Their bedroom had become a counseling suite for families suspecting abuse. The living room where they died was now a memorial space with photos of all 137 confirmed victims. The reporters are gathering outside, Marcus Hoffman said, adjusting his tie nervously. As the Foundation's Director of Prevention Services, he'd become my right hand in building our organization. Senator Williams just arrived along with 3 congressional representatives. And the survivors. 43 families confirmed. Mrs. Patterson insisted on bringing her famous cookies. He smiled at the mention of the woman whose life he'd saved by refusing to kill. She calls them conscience cookies now. Through the window, I could see the crowd growing. FBI agents who'd worked our case, prosecutors who'd convicted Chen's network, families whose elderly members we'd saved from Phase 3, and somewhere among them, According to our security team, at least 2 suspected Phase 3 operatives monitoring our activities. The Chicago summit was 2 weeks away. Our infiltration team was ready. 20 specialists, including former FBI agents, forensic accountants, medical professionals, and technology experts. We'd registered openly as the Lawson Foundation delegation, practically daring them to deny us entry. Ms. Lawson. Jennifer Martinez appeared at the doorway holding a tablet. There's something you need to see. Someone leaked internal Phase 3 documents to WikiLeaks. The internet's exploding. I took the tablet, scanning rapidly. Internal memos discussing mortality acceleration protocols. Budget projections showing healthcare savings from natural transition enhancement. A PowerPoint presentation titled The Silver Tsunami Solution: Managing America's Demographic Crisis Through Compassionate Innovation. Who leaked this? I asked. Unknown, but the documents are authentic. I recognize some from Bradley's intelligence. This could destroy their credibility before the summit even happens. My phone rang. Detective Morgan voiced tense. Rose, we've got a problem. Senator Richardson just called a press conference. He's spinning the leaks as fabricated propaganda from hysterical activists trying to derail necessary healthcare reform. On the television, Richardson's distinguished face filled the screen. These so-called leaked documents are clearly fabrications designed to frighten vulnerable Americans. The Healthcare and Inheritance Reform Summit represents the best minds in medicine, law, and ethics coming together to solve real problems. We won't be deterred by conspiracy theorists. He's getting ahead of the story, I realized, making us look like extremists before we can present evidence. It gets worse, Morgan continued. Dr. Helm just published an op-ed in the Times calling you specifically a traumatized woman projecting her family tragedy onto innocent reform efforts. They're painting you as unstable Rose. The coordinated counterattack was brilliant. By acknowledging the leaks immediately and dismissing them, they'd inoculated themselves against future revelations. By attacking me personally, they'd undermined the Foundation's credibility. Then we pivot, I decided. If they want to make this about me, let's give them what they want. Schedule a press conference for immediately after the opening ceremony. I'll respond to Dr. Helm publicly. Rose, that's what they want, to make you the story instead of their plans. Exactly. While everyone's watching me, our team will be documenting everything at the summit. Let them think I'm an emotional, grieving daughter. They'll never see the real investigation coming. The opening ceremony proceeded smoothly. Senator Williams spoke eloquently about the Lawson Law's success. Elder abuse prosecutions up 400%, suspicious deaths investigated automatically, billions in stolen assets recovered. But I could feel the undercurrent of tension. Phase 3. Operatives mixed with genuine supporters, everyone wondering who could be trusted. Mrs. Patterson cut the ribbon with hands that had once been destined to prepare her own poison tea. This center stands as proof that love defeats greed, she declared, that families are more than economic units, that every gray hair represents wisdom earned, not wealth to steal. During the reception, I mingled carefully, noting who avoided me and who seemed too eager to approach. An elegant woman in her 60s introduced herself as Dr. Margaret Foster from Johns Hopkins. I've followed your work with interest, she said, studying me with sharp intelligence. Your foundation's prevention protocols are being adopted nationwide. Quite impressive for someone so young. Tragedy ages you quickly, Dr. Foster. Watching your parents murdered by your brother adds decades overnight. Indeed. I imagine it also provides unique insights into family dynamics. Tell me, do you think Bradley was born evil, or did circumstances create him? A probing question. I chose my words carefully. Bradley was broken by debt and manipulated by our uncle, but he chose to poison our parents. Evil is always a choice, doctor, just as reform that enables evil is a choice. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Interesting philosophy. I look forward to debating it in Chicago. I'm presenting on end-of-life care innovations. Perhaps you'll attend. I wouldn't miss it. After she left, Marcus appeared at my elbow. That's one of them. Dr. Foster authored 3 papers cited in the Phase 3 documents. She's developed chemical compounds that mimic natural death so perfectly autopsies can't detect them. Then we'll be sure to record every word of her presentation. The press conference afterward was a masterclass in public relations warfare. Dr. Helm had called me traumatized. I owned it. Yes, I'm traumatized, I told the packed room of reporters. Traumatized by finding my parents dead from thallium poisoning. Traumatized by discovering my brother had been murdering them for months while I cared for them. Traumatized by learning this was part of a network that killed 137 elderly Americans. But that trauma doesn't make me wrong about Phase 3. It makes me experienced in recognizing murder disguised as mercy. Ms. Lawson, a reporter called out, Senator Richardson says you're fear-mongering about legitimate healthcare reform. How do you respond? I respond with facts. The leaked documents, which Richardson dismisses as fabrications, contain specific chemical formulas for undetectable poisons. They include actuarial tables calculating inheritance flow from accelerated mortality. They describe recruiting procedures targeting healthcare workers in elder care facilities. These aren't reforms. They're blueprints for industrialized murder. But surely some reform is needed. Another reporter pressed, healthcare costs for the elderly are bankrupting families. Reform, yes. Murder, no. The Lawson Foundation supports dozens of legitimate reforms: better palliative care, honest end-of-life discussions, sustainable healthcare funding. What we don't support is creating loopholes that let killers operate with medical licenses. The questions continued for an hour. I presented evidence statistics case studies, but the real victory came when Jennifer Martinez. That evening, as the center emptied of visitors, I found myself alone in the memorial room with photos of the victims. My parents smiled from their frame, the picture taken at their 40th anniversary party just months before Bradley began poisoning them. I'm trying, I whispered to their image, trying to save others from what happened to you. They'd be proud. I turned to find Bradley's attorney, Lisa Chen, no relation to Vincent, standing in the doorway. What are you doing here? Bradley sent me. He's been analyzing the Phase 3 documents from prison, cross-referencing with his memories. He found something. She handed me a sealed envelope. He said to tell you Chicago isn't the real summit. It's a decoy. My hands shook as I opened Bradley's letter. Rose? The leaked documents are real but incomplete. Chicago is theater. A public show of reasonable reform to distract from the real gathering. The true Phase 3 launch is in Switzerland, same dates. International scope, no U.S. jurisdiction. While you're in Chicago fighting shadows, they'll be in Geneva creating global protocols. The architect isn't American. They're building worldwide infrastructure for inheritance acceleration. I'm sorry, I can't do more from here. Chen's people make another attempt on my life weekly, but I heard about the center, about your work. You're saving the families I helped destroy. I know forgiveness is impossible, but know that every night I dream of Mom's meals before I poisoned them. I awake tasting thallium and her love. Prison isn't punishment enough for that betrayal. Stop them in Geneva. Chicago's important, but Switzerland is where they'll write the real rules. Your broken brother Bradley. I immediately called Morgan. We need liaison with Interpol, the real summit's in Geneva. We can't operate in Switzerland, Rose. No jurisdiction. But the Foundation can. We're a private organization. Nothing stops us from attending an international conference on healthcare reform. Except the part where they'll know you're coming and probably kill you. Then we split up. Public team to Chicago, creating noise and distraction. Covert team to Geneva for the real investigation. They can't be in both places at once. Morgan sighed. You're going to Geneva. Of course. Bradley's intelligence has been accurate so far. If the architect's there, that's where I need to be. Rose, this is getting bigger than elder murder. International conspiracy, global healthcare protocols. You're talking about changing how the entire world treats aging. Good, because limiting it to America was never going to be enough. Wealth concentration in elderly hands is global. If Phase 3 succeeds anywhere, it'll spread everywhere. I looked around the center we'd built from our tragedy. In 6 months, we'd gone from a family destroyed by greed to a foundation saving thousands. But Switzerland represented the next evolution, stopping murder from becoming global policy. Get me everything on international elder care protocols, I told Marcus. Financial flows insurance structures, inheritance law. If we're going to Geneva, we need to speak their language. Already on it. Also, Mrs. Patterson wants to come to Chicago, says if they're planning to murder people like her, she wants to look them in the eye while they do it. Tell her yes. In fact, invite all our survivor families who are willing. Let Phase 3 present their reforms to rooms full of intended victims. See how their euphemisms sound when spoken to faces they plan to poison. The next 2 weeks blurred with preparation. By day, I ran the foundation and prepared for Chicago. By night, I studied Geneva intelligence with a select team. The Swiss summit was invitation-only, hosted by the International Health Innovation Institute. A think tank we discovered was funded by the same shell companies that had backed Chen. 3 days before departure, another assassination attempt on Bradley failed. This time, he'd been saved by the Aryan Brotherhood of all groups. Apparently, they had elderly parents too and didn't appreciate Phase 3's plans. Even among prisoners, murdering grandparents crossed a line. The enemy of my enemy, Morgan said wryly when informed, though I never thought I'd be grateful to white supremacists for anything. Evil, fighting evil, I corrected, while good people prepare for war. The night before Chicago, I stood in my parents' garden, now part of the memorial space. Tomorrow, I'd fly into a trap, whether in Chicago or Geneva. The architect waited in one of those cities with plans to normalize the murder of millions. But I wasn't the same grieving daughter who'd sat in Attorney Fitzgerald's office learning about betrayal. 6 months of fighting had forged me into something harder, smarter, more dangerous to their plans. The strong one had become the warrior. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. The architect is eager to meet you, Ms. Lawson. You've become quite the celebrity in certain circles. The woman who turned family tragedy into a crusade. How very American. In Geneva, you'll learn how the rest of the world solves problems. Less sentiment, more efficiency. Welcome to the global stage. I typed back, looking forward to it. Bring your best arguments for murder. I'll bring the faces of everyone you've killed. Let's see which is more convincing. No response came, but I hadn't expected one. The battle lines were drawn. Chicago would be the distraction. Geneva would be the war. And somewhere in those conferences rooms, the architect waited with plans to make every family a potential murder scene. Time to show them that American sentiment backed by evidence and fury could stop any system that valued money over mothers, inheritance, over integrity. The recovery from our family tragedy was complete. Now came the reckoning for those who'd caused it and planned to cause it for millions more. The prison visiting room had become as familiar as my childhood bedroom over the past 6 months. Bradley sat across from me, looking healthier than during the trial, despite 3 assassination attempts. Prison doctors had successfully treated the malnutrition and organ damage from his years of drug abuse. Ironically, incarceration had saved his life in more ways than one. Geneva, he said without preamble, you're really going. Your intelligence was correct. The Swiss Federal Intelligence Service confirmed unusual activity around the International Health Innovation Institute, private jets arriving from 12 countries, security contracts for 500 personnel. They're planning something massive. Rose, there's something else I need to tell you about Christopher, about why he really disappeared 20 years ago. I leaned forward. Every revelation from Bradley had proven crucial. What about him? He didn't just run after killing Grandma and Grandpa. He was recruited. The architect found him, saw potential in his methods, and offered him a position in something bigger. Christopher wasn't the beginning. He was a test case. Test case for what? For whether Americans would accept inheritance acceleration if packaged correctly. He was supposed to build a network, prove the concept, gather data. Everything he did here was beta testing for the global rollout. My blood chilled. We weren't fighting the disease. We were fighting symptoms. Exactly, and there's more. I met someone here transferred from federal prison last month. Gregory Winters. He ran the Australian version of our network. 43 victims over 15 years. He says there are similar operations in Japan, Germany, Brazil, anywhere with aging populations and concentrated wealth. How many countries? At least 30, all reporting to regional directors who report to the architect. Geneva isn't planning phase 3, it's coordinating phases that have been running globally for decades. I pulled out my tablet, showing him photos our intelligence team had gathered. Recognize any of these people? Bradley studied each face carefully. He pointed to an elegant Asian woman, Dr. Yuki Tanaka. Christopher met with her once. I remember, because she spoke perfect English with no accent, like she'd been trained to blend anywhere. And him, indicating a distinguished African man. Professor Olumide from Nigeria. Chris called him the African death merchant, said he'd killed more elders than malaria. They're all attending Geneva, along with healthcare ministers from 40 countries. It's not a summit, Bradley realized. It's a victory celebration. They think they've already won. A guard knocked. 5 minutes left. Bradley spoke quickly. Rose, I've been thinking about forgiveness, not asking for it. I know I don't deserve it, but about what it means. You've turned our family's destruction into salvation for thousands. That's the ultimate forgiveness, not forgetting evil, but transforming it into good. Pretty words don't resurrect our parents, Bradley. No, but your work ensures their death meant something. Every elder you save carries a part of mom and dad forward. That's immortality, worth more than any inheritance. Is that why you're helping to give their death meaning? I'm helping because it's the only thing keeping me sane. Every piece of intelligence I provide, every plot I expose, balances the scales microscopically. I'll die in here, but maybe fewer elders will die out there because of what I know. The guard knocked again. 2 minutes. Bradley, if something happens to me in Geneva, nothing will happen. His voice carried surprising strength. You know why? Because you're not going alone. Every family you've saved, every elder still alive because of your work, they're all going with you in spirit. The architect thinks they're fighting one traumatized woman. They're actually fighting millions of grandparents who refuse to be murdered for money. When did you become philosophical? 23 hours a day in solitary gives you time to think. He stood, chains rattling. There's one more thing. Christopher kept journals. Not about murders, about the philosophy behind them. The architect's manifesto. He hid them in our old treehouse. The one Dad built when we were kids. That was torn down years ago. The treehouse was, but there's a metal box buried beneath where the oak stood, 3 feet down, waterproofed. I saw him bury it the night before he vanished again. Thought it was money, but he said it was more valuable. It was truth. The guards approached to take him away. Rose, Bradley called as they let him off. Tell Geneva that Bradley Lawson sends his regards. Tell them the poisoner's sister is coming for them all. 3 hours later, I stood in what used to be our backyard, now owned by a young family who'd graciously allowed me to dig. The metal detector found it exactly where Bradley said, 3 feet down, wrapped in plastic and oilcloth. Inside were 3 leather journals filled with Christopher's precise handwriting. But these weren't murder plans. They were philosophical treatises, economic analyses, and most chillingly, correspondence with someone signing themselves only as A. Dear Christopher, one letter read, "Your work in New York confirms our hypothesis. Families will indeed facilitate their own destruction if given proper motivation and framework. The guilt you mention in your nephew is unfortunate but manageable. Remember, we're not creating evil. We're channeling existing darkness toward productive ends. Every fortune that transfers from the dying to the living strengthens society. You are a surgeon cutting out economic tumors. Be proud." Another entry from Christopher. A says the timeline is 40 years. By 2050, inheritance acceleration will be as accepted as abortion or euthanasia. Controversial but legal, regulated but available. We're not killing the elderly, we're liberating wealth trapped in dying hands. Future generations will thank us for their prosperity. The final journal entry was dated a week before Christopher's death. Bradley has exceeded expectations but grows unstable. Recommend termination after parents' assets transfer. Rosemary remains problematic. Too intelligent, too persistent. Suggests making her example of what happens to obstacles. I disagree. She could be turned if approached correctly. Her analytical mind would serve our cause well. We'll discuss in Geneva. Geneva. Even 20 years ago, it was always Geneva. Sarah Martinez arrived as I finished photographing the journals. The Chicago team is ready. 40 foundation members plus security. Media credentials approved. We'll make noise while you investigate Switzerland. Any word on visa approvals for Geneva? Approved this morning. You, Marcus, and 5 investigators, small enough to avoid attention, skilled enough to document everything. Good. Book us on separate flights, different airlines. No patterns for them to track. That evening, I convened both teams at the foundation. The Chicago group included survivors like Mrs. Patterson, reformed accomplices like Jennifer Martinez, and families who'd lost elders to Chen's network. Each wore buttons with photos of murdered relatives, visual reminders of Phase 3's human cost. Chicago team, I address them. Your job is distraction. Attend every panel. Ask uncomfortable questions. Make them justify their reforms to faces of intended victims. Be visible, loud, morally unassailable. While they're managing you, we'll be documenting the real plans in Geneva. What if they refuse to let us in? Mrs. Patterson asked. Then, make that the story. Elderly woman denied access to conference planning her death. Media will eat it up. Your very presence is our weapon. They can't advocate for killing grandmothers while grandmothers sit in their audience. Geneva team. I turn to the smaller group. We're intelligence gathering only. No confrontations, no announcements. Document everything. Presentations, private conversations, financial structures. The architect will be there. When we identify them, we watch and learn. This isn't about stopping Geneva. It's about understanding it so we can dismantle it globally. Marcus raised a hand. What if they identify us first? They will. But killing American investigators at an international conference would destroy their credibility. They need legitimacy more than they need us dead. Use that. Be visible enough that harming us creates headlines invisible enough to gather intelligence. And if the architect approaches you directly, Sarah asked, then I learn why someone dedicates 40 years to normalizing murder. What breaks a person so thoroughly that killing elders seems reasonable? What philosophy justifies turning families into financial instruments? I need to understand the enemy to defeat them. Later that night, I sat with Christopher's journals in my parents' kitchen, trying to comprehend the mind behind our tragedy. He wrote eloquently about economic efficiency, demographics, sustainability, resource allocation. In his twisted logic, the elderly were parasites draining society's vitality. Murder wasn't crime, but correction. One passage stood out. A explained it perfectly today. We don't create killers, we reveal them. In every family lurks someone who wishes grandma would die faster, who calculates inheritance while pretending grief. We simply give them permissioned framework justification. The darkness already exists. We merely organize it. Was he right? Did darkness lurk in every family waiting for permission to emerge? I thought about Brady's descent. From indebted son to poisoner in months. How many others teetered on that edge, needing only a push? My phone rang, unknown international number. Ms. Lawson, a cultured voice with an indefinable accent, spoke. I trust you received Christopher's journals. He spoke highly of your potential before his untimely death. The architect, I presume? Such dramatic titles. I prefer to think of myself as a social engineer. Christopher's journals explain our philosophy. Did you find them illuminating? I found them repulsive. You've turned family into a financial equation. Haven't all families done that already? Every will is an equation. Every inheritance is a calculation. We simply make the math more efficient. By murdering the variables you don't like. By allowing natural selection in families. The strong survive, the weak perish, resources flow to those who will use them productively. It's evolution applied to economics. It's serial killing with spreadsheets. A soft laugh. You Americans and your moral absolutes. In Geneva, you'll meet colleagues from cultures where honoring elders includes helping them die with dignity, where family resources belong to the young and vital, where our work is seen as compassionate necessity. Compassion doesn't require thallium. No, but efficiency does. Natural death is messy, prolonged, expensive. Our methods are clean, quick, profitable. The difference between barbarism and civilization. I'll see your civilization in Geneva, and I'll expose it for the murder factory it is. I'm counting on it, Ms. Lawson. You see, you're not our opposition. You're our validation. Every reform needs its critic. Every thesis its antithesis. You provide the moral outrage that makes our practical solutions seem reasonable by comparison. Geneva will thank you for attending. The line went dead. I sat in my murdered parents' kitchen, understanding finally that I wasn't fighting crime but ideology. The architect didn't see murder. They saw market correction. Chen killed for money, Christopher for philosophy, but the architect killed for a vision of humanity, where love was inefficiency and family was commodity. 2 days until Chicago, 4 until Geneva. Somewhere in Switzerland, architects of global genocide prepared to normalize the murder of millions. They thought I was coming as their useful opposition, the extreme voice that made them seem moderate. They were wrong. I was coming as my parents' daughter, my grandparents' legacy, and the voice of every elder marked for death by their calculations. The reunion in Geneva wouldn't be between ideologies, but between humanity and its would-be engineers. The strong one was ready for war. But first, she had to understand the enemy's strength. Christopher's journals were just the beginning. Geneva would reveal the full scope of their 40-year plan. And then somehow, I'd stop it. Not with sentiment or moral absolutes, but with the one thing the architect couldn't calculate: the unpredictable power of love to survive any equation that tries to eliminate it. 2 years had passed since Vincent Chen's conviction. The Lawson Foundation now occupied a gleaming building in Manhattan, its walls lined with photos of elders we'd saved and memorials to those we couldn't. I stood before Congress for the 4th time, but today was different. Today we were winning. Senators, representatives. I addressed the packed hearing room. 2 years ago, I sat in an attorney's office learning my parents had left me nothing. Today, I stand before you announcing that the Lawson Foundation has helped recover $50 million in fraudulently obtained inheritances, prevented 300 attempted murders, and trained 5,000 healthcare workers to recognize signs of elder abuse. Applause rippled through the gallery where hundreds of family members sat, many wearing buttons with their saved relatives' faces. Mrs. Patterson, now 85, and our most vocal advocate beamed from the front row. But we're here today because our work revealed something darker than individual criminals, I continued. We discovered a global network attempting to normalize elder murder through policy reform. What we call Phase 3 has infected healthcare systems, insurance companies, and governments across 43 nations. I clicked to the first slide. A world map showing Phase 3 infiltration. Red dots clustered in developed nations with aging populations. Each dot represents a confirmed cell planning to implement inheritance acceleration protocols. Without intervention, they'll transform elder care into elder elimination within a decade. Senator Williams leaned forward. Ms. Lawson, you're suggesting a conspiracy of unprecedented scope. What evidence supports this? Geneva Senator, 6 months ago, my team infiltrated the International Health Innovation Summit. What we discovered there changes everything. The Geneva operation had been our masterpiece. While the Chicago team created calculated chaos, Mrs. Patterson confronting speakers about their death panels, Jennifer Martinez recording every euphemism for murder, our Swiss team documented the real agenda. The summit's true purpose was standardizing global protocols for what they call managed transition services. I explained, showing secretly recorded presentations. Dr. Yuki Tanaka from Japan presented chemical compounds that mimic natural death so perfectly no autopsy could detect murder. Professor Olumide from Nigeria demonstrated psychological techniques for convincing families that killing elders was compassionate. Dr. Margaret Foster from Johns Hopkins outlined implementation strategies for American healthcare systems. And the architect, Representative Johnson asked, did you identify Phase 3's leader? I paused, remembering that moment in Geneva when everything clicked. Yes, the architect attended every session, participated in every discussion, shaped every protocol. They were hiding in plain sight. The hearing room held its breath. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, director of the World Health Organization's Elder Care Initiative, respected gerontologist, published author on end-of-life dignity, an architect of a 40-year plan to eliminate the elderly as an economic class. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Hartwell was internationally renowned winner of humanitarian awards, advisor to presidents and prime ministers. Exposing her had taken months of careful documentation. That's a serious accusation, Senator Richardson said carefully. I noticed sweat on his forehead. Our investigation had linked him to Phase 3 funding, though we couldn't prove criminal knowledge yet. I don't make it lightly. I played audio from Geneva Hartwell's cultured British accent, filling the chamber. Ladies and gentlemen, we stand at humanity's crossroads. Do we allow demographics to bankrupt our societies, wealth to stagnate in dying hands? Or do we courageously acknowledge that extended life without quality is cruelty, that resources must flow to the productive, that families deserve freedom from elder care's burden? We're not discussing murder. We're discussing mercy. Pretty words, hiding ugly truth, I said as the recording ended. But Hartwell made a mistake in Geneva. She approached me directly. Another recording played, our private conversation in a Swiss hotel bar. You fascinate me, Rosemary, Hartwell's voice purred. Such passion defending a system that killed your parents as surely as Bradley's poison. They died alone, afraid, abandoned by healthcare that warehouses elders until they expire. We offer dignity. My recorded response, you offer murder with medical degrees. I offer choice. Every family should decide when grandfather's time has come, when grandmother's suffering outweighs her staying. We simply provide framework for those decisions. Framework for killing. My parents didn't choose to die. Bradley chose for them. Because current systems forced his hand crudely. Under our protocols, trained professionals would have managed your parents' transition peacefully. No thallium, no months of poisoning, just sleep and family inheritance flowing naturally. Nothing natural about induced death, Dr. Hartwell. More natural than tubes and machines extending misery. Your American sentiment blinds you to global reality. In Switzerland, assisted dying is accepted. In Netherlands, euthanasia is medical care. We're simply expanding definitions to include economic suffering alongside physical. The chamber sat silent as Hartwell's philosophy filled the room. Then came the crucial exchange. Tell me, I'd asked, when did you decide the elderly should die? When my grandmother lingered for 7 years with dementia, bankrupting our family, destroying my parents' marriage, consuming resources that could have educated a dozen grandchildren. When I realized love meant letting go, not holding on. When I understood that honoring our elders meant freeing them from indignity, not prolonging it. So you built a murder network from personal pain. I built a solution from personal experience. 40 years of research planning, careful implementation. Christopher and Chen were crude instruments, but they proved the concept. Families will facilitate transition if given proper structure. Geneva codifies that structure globally. The recording ended. Senator Williams spoke first. Has Dr. Hartwell been arrested? Siya. She's been recalled by the WHO for investigation. Switzerland is considering charges. But here's the complexity. Nothing she proposed in Geneva was explicitly illegal. Every protocol had medical justification. Every chemical could be legitimately prescribed. Every procedure followed healthcare guidelines. She's created murder that looks like medicine. Then how do we stop it? Representative Johnson asked. By exposing it, by teaching families to recognize the signs, by legislation that closes the loopholes, and by changing the culture that sees elders as burdens rather than blessings. I showed slides of our successes. The Lawson Centers now operated in 15 cities, providing resources for families suspecting abuse. Our training programs had reached 50,000 healthcare workers. The Lawson laws had been adopted by 38 states, with federal legislation pending. But our greatest success, I said, displaying a photo, is Bradley. The image showed my brother in prison teaching a class to fellow inmates. His students, many convicted of elder abuse, listened intently as he explained manipulation techniques to recognize and resist. Bradley Lawson, who murdered our parents, now prevents murders by teaching criminals how they were recruited, trained, and manipulated. His Breaking the Chain program has reached 700 inmates. 40 have provided intelligence about unknown Phase 3 operations. He'll die in prison, but he's saving lives from behind bars. It had taken 18 months before I could visit Bradley without rage consuming me. Another 6 before we could have real conversations. Forgiveness remained impossible, but cooperation had emerged. His intelligence from prison networks had exposed Phase 3 operations in 12 states. The transformation isn't just Bradley's, I continued. Jennifer Martinez, who impersonated me to torment my dying mother, now leads our victim outreach program. Marcus Hoffman recruited to kill, but refused trains others to resist recruitment. Even victims' families have transformed grief into advocacy. Mrs. Patterson stood in the gallery, her conscience cookies having become famous at survivor gatherings. She represented thousands who turned near-death experiences into life-saving activism. Phase 3 believed they could normalize murder by making it medical, professional, economic. They didn't anticipate victims fighting back criminals, reforming families, uniting across tragedy. They calculated everything except love's ability to transform pain into purpose. What do you need from Congress? Senator Williams asked. Pass the Federal Lawson Act, mandate toxicology screening for elder deaths, create interstate databases tracking suspicious inheritances patterns, fund training for healthcare workers, but most importantly, declare that American elders have the right to natural death free from economic pressure or medical manipulation. EGOM critics argue this will prevent legitimate end-of-life care. Senator Richardson interjected, still probing for weaknesses. The Lawson Act explicitly protects legitimate care. What it prevents is turning that care into camouflaged killing. There's a clear line between helping someone die comfortably and making them die conveniently. Phase 3 erased that line. We're redrawing it in law. The hearing continued for hours. I presented evidence of Phase 3 infiltration in American healthcare systems, showed how insurance companies were already adopting Hartwell's transition protocols, demonstrated how medical schools were teaching economic factors in end-of-life decisions. But the most powerful moment came when Marcus entered with a sealed box. "Senators, this contains something Bradley asked me to deliver," he announced. "Letters from prisoners whose families were targeted by Phase 3, men and women who discovered too late they'd been manipulated into murdering their own parents." One by one, committee members read confessions of broken people who'd poisoned grandparents, staged accidents, forged documents. Each letter ended the same way. "Don't let others fall like I did. Stop them from turning love into murder." As the hearing concluded, Senator Williams announced, "The committee unanimously recommends passage of the Federal Lawson Act with amendments strengthening international cooperation against Phase 3 operations." Victory, but incomplete. Hartwell remained free, her network intact though exposed. Phase 3 had retreated, but not surrendered. The war continued, but we'd won the crucial battle. Outside the Capitol, survivors and advocates gathered. Mrs. Patterson hugged me fiercely. "Your parents would be so proud, dear. You've turned their tragedy into triumph." "We all have," I corrected, looking at the crowd of transformed lives. "Every person here chose purpose over pain." That evening, I stood in what had been my parents' bedroom, now the Lawson Center's counseling suite. Where they died, families now found hope. Where Bradley had poisoned them, we taught others to recognize danger. The house that had held such horror had become a beacon of healing. My phone rang, an unknown international number. "Congratulations on your congressional victory." Hartwell's voice remained cultured calm. "Though you must know this is merely intermission, not conclusion. Your network is exposed. Your protocols are banned. You've lost Hartwell." Have I checked tomorrow's news from India, Brazil, Russia? Nations embracing managed transition services because they can't afford American sentiment. You've won a battle in one country while losing the war globally. Then we'll fight globally. With what resources, American donations, congressional funding I have, the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, governments desperate for solutions to demographic crisis. You have sympathy. I have systems. You have murder disguised as mathematics. I have families who refuse to be equations. We'll see which proves stronger. Enjoy your victory, Rosemary. But remember, I've planned for 40 years while you've fought for 2. This transformation you celebrate. It's exactly what I expected. Opposition validates necessity. Your success makes my solution seem more reasonable to desperate nations. Keep telling yourself that while your network crumbles, my network evolves. Today's defeat becomes tomorrow's adaptation. But I do admire your persistence. Christopher was right. You would have made an excellent architect. The offer remains open. I'd rather die like my parents than live like you. Your parents died because systems failed them. I'm trying to fix those systems. History will vindicate me, Rosemary. When the demographic bomb explodes, when elder care bankrupts nations, when families collapse under caregiving burden, they'll beg for my solutions. And I'll be ready thanks to lessons learned fighting you. The line went dead. I stood in my transformed childhood home understanding the war's true scope. We'd won in America, but Hartwell was right. Desperate nations might embrace her solutions. The transformation wasn't complete. Perhaps it never would be. But looking at photos of saved elders, reading letters from reformed criminals, seeing families united in purpose, I knew we'd keep fighting. The Strong One had become something more, a movement that transformed tragedy into justice, one life at a time. Tomorrow, the Lawson Foundation would open centers in Delhi, Sao Paulo, and Moscow, cities Hartwell had mentioned. We'd meet her global network with our own. Transform international tragedy into international justice. The war continued, but tonight we transformed enough to know victory was possible. Love could defeat calculation. Families could overcome equations. And somewhere in heaven, I hoped my parents were watching their daughter honor their memory by saving others from their fate. 5 years after finding my parents dead, I stood before the United Nations General Assembly. The gleaming hall held representatives from 193 nations gathered for an unprecedented vote on the Global Elder Protection Treaty. In the gallery sat hundreds who'd shaped this moment. Mrs. Patterson at 90, Jennifer Martinez holding her newborn daughter, named after my mother, Marcus Hoffman with his wife he'd met at our foundation, and connected via satellite from Rikers Island, Bradley, watching from the prison library. Distinguished delegates. I began my voice steady despite the magnitude of this moment. 5 years ago, I discovered my parents had been murdered by my brother for inheritance. That personal tragedy unveiled a global conspiracy to normalize the murder of our elderly. Today, you decide whether humanity protects its elders or permits their systematic elimination. The treaty had been 3 years in negotiation. After exposing Dr. Hartwell in Geneva, we'd built an international coalition of families, healthcare workers, and reformed perpetrators. Nation by nation, we'd revealed Phase 3 infiltration, prevented thousands of murders, and transformed grief into global advocacy. The opposition claims this treaty restricts healthcare innovation and family choice, I continued, but there's nothing innovative about murder. Nothing liberating about manipulating families into killing grandparents. The Global Elder Protection Treaty simply declares that every human has the right to natural death, free from economic pressure or medical manipulation. In the assembly, I could see resistance from certain delegations. Nations facing severe demographic crises viewed elder care costs as existential threats. Hartwell had spent 2 years since Geneva building support for managed transition as economic necessity. Let me share what real transformation looks like, I said, clicking to show images. Mumbai, where the Lawson Center prevented 43 murders last year. Sao Paulo, where reformed perpetrators teach families to recognize manipulation. Moscow, where babushkas who survived poisoning now counsel others. This isn't American sentiment imposed globally. It's human dignity defended universally. The Indian delegate raised his hand. Ms. Lawson, India has 800 million people over 60 by 2050. How do we afford care without managed transition options? By transforming how we value aging ambassador. The Lawson Foundation's economic analysis shows elder wisdom contributing $2 trillion annually through experience volunteerism and family stability. Phase 3 sees costs. We see assets. Your elders aren't burdens. They're libraries of knowledge, anchors of culture, bridges between generations. Pretty words, the Russian delegate interjected, but hospitals overflow pensions, bankrupt governments. Hartwell offers solutions. Hartwell offers murder marketed as mercy. Yes, aging populations challenge us, but humanity's answer cannot be eliminating the aged. We don't solve poverty by killing the poor or healthcare costs by murdering the sick. We innovate, adapt, transform, but we don't kill. The Chinese delegate stood. China implemented one-child policy for population control. Now we face 4-2-1 problem. 1 child supporting 2 parents and 4 grandparents. Without transition protocols, our society collapses. Or transforms, I countered. Singapore created integrated communities where elders contribute childcare wisdom stability. Japan pioneered robotics for elder assistance. Norway developed intergenerational housing that enriches all ages. Solutions exist that don't require poison. For 2 hours, I fielded questions, presented evidence, countered arguments, but the real power came from testimonies I'd arranged. First, Marcus Hoffman spoke via video. I was 23, drowning in student debt when Phase 3 recruited me. They made killing Mrs. Patterson sound like mercy, but when I stood in her kitchen with poisoned tea, I saw my grandmother's face. Love saved me from becoming a murderer. This treaty ensures others have that same chance. Then Jennifer Martinez took the podium. I tormented dying parents with cruel phone calls pretending to be their daughter. The scripts Phase 3 gave me were psychological torture designed to isolate victims. I live with those voices every day. This treaty prevents such systematic cruelty from becoming global policy. But it was Bradley's testimony that shifted the room. On screen from prison, my brother looked directly at the camera. I am Bradley Lawson. I murdered my parents for money. I poisoned them for 7 months while my sister cared for them. I destroyed their faith in her love to hide my crimes. I am exactly what Phase 3 creates, a child turned into a killer by debt and manipulation. His voice broke slightly. I can't undo my crimes. My parents died believing their daughter abandoned them because I made that lie real. But I can warn you, Phase 3 doesn't create killers from nothing. They find desperation in families and weaponize it. They take normal financial stress and transform it into murder. Every nation considering Hartwell's protocols is considering turning its children into me. Look at me, broken, imprisoned, tormented by parents I poisoned. Is this the future you want for your families? The assembly sat silent as Bradley continued. My sister Rosemary transformed our tragedy into global salvation. Where I brought death, she brings life. Where I destroyed families, she saves them. The choice before you is simple: become nations of Bradleys or nations of Rosemarys. Choose wisely. When debate resumed, the momentum had shifted. Delegate after delegate spoke of elderly parents, grandparents who'd sacrificed for them, the unthinkable horror of systematizing their murder. Dr. Hartwell watched from the observer section, her face calm despite her faction's crumbling support. During a break, she approached me. "Emotional manipulation," she said quietly. "Using your broken brother to guilt nations into economic suicide. I expected better tactics." "I use truth. You use lies wrapped in economics. The difference matters." "Does it? In 10 years, when healthcare systems collapse under elder care weight, when young families can't afford children because they're supporting parents, will your truth feed them? Will your love pay their bills?" "No, but neither will murder. You see binary choice. Kill elders or bankrupt nations. I see opportunity for innovation. Every crisis drives human creativity. We'll find solutions that don't require poison." Naive optimism. I've studied demographic reality for 40 years. Without managed transition, developed nations face collapse. Your treaty condemns billions to poverty, protecting millions who'll die naturally soon anyway. Soon, by whose timeline my parents had years left before Bradley's poison. Every elder Phase 3 targets has life remaining. You're not hastening inevitable death. You're stealing time that belongs to them. Time that costs. Everything worth preserving costs something. Love costs, family costs, dignity costs. The question is whether we pay those costs or eliminate the people who create them. Humanity's answer defines who we are as a species. She studied me with those cold blue eyes. "You've won this battle, Rosemary. The treaty will pass, but economics remains economics. When the bills come due, when nations face elder care reality, they'll resurrect my protocols under new names. Necessity always defeats sentiment eventually. Then I'll be there to fight new names with old truth. Every time murder wears medicine's mask, the Lawson Foundation will expose it. We're not going away, Hartwell. Neither are the families we protect. Nor am I. Merely evolving. Your treaty creates barriers. I'll find gaps. You close one door, I'll open windows. This isn't ending merely adapting, but I do respect your persistence. You've made my work significantly more challenging. Good, murder should be difficult. When the assembly reconvened, the vote was called. Nation by nation delegates cast their ballots. Yes, yes, yes. Some abstained. Countries where Phase 3 influence ran deep, but when the final tally appeared, the treaty passed 147 to 15 with 31 abstentions. The gallery erupted. Mrs. Patterson wept openly. Marcus hugged his wife. Even Bradley, watching from prison, allowed himself a small smile. The Global Elder Protection Treaty would become international law, making systematic elder murder a crime against humanity. But victory felt incomplete. Hartwell had escaped prosecution protected by diplomatic immunity and legal technicalities. Phase 3's network, while exposed, hadn't been eliminated. The infrastructure for normalized murder remained waiting for resurrection under new names. That evening at the Foundation's celebration, I found myself on the roof garden overlooking Manhattan. 5 years ago, I'd been a forensic accountant living a quiet life. Now I led a global movement protecting millions of elderly from murder. "You did it," Sarah Martinez said, joining me. "International law protecting elders from systematic murder. Your parents would be amazed." "We did it," I corrected. "Every family who spoke out, every perpetrator who reformed, every elder who survived. This isn't my victory, it's theirs." What now? The treaty's passed. Phase 3's exposed. Hartwell's neutralized. Do we declare victory? We remain vigilant. Hartwell was right about one thing. Necessity drives innovation. When elder care costs spike, when demographics pressure nations, someone will propose new solutions that look suspiciously like old murders. We'll be ready. Forever. For as long as families contain both love and greed, as long as inheritance creates temptation, as long as people like Hartwell see humans as economic units, the Foundation continues. My phone buzzed. A message from Bradley. "Watch the vote from library." Other inmates cheering. "Even killers know some lines shouldn't be crossed. Mom and Dad would be proud. You transformed our shame into global salvation. Thank you for not letting me destroy everything, your broken but grateful brother." I typed back, "You helped save thousands by exposing Phase 3. That doesn't erase your crimes, but it matters. Mom asked me not to let you die alone. You won't. The work continues." As New York glittered below, I thought about the journey from that attorney's office to the UN General Assembly, from personal tragedy to global transformation, from finding my parents murdered to protecting millions of grandparents worldwide. The strong one had become something more. A guardian of humanity's most vulnerable, a voice for those Phase 3 would silence a reminder that love defeats calculation when given the chance to fight. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Nations would test the treaty's boundaries. Hartwell would probe for weaknesses. Families would face temptation. But tonight we celebrated. In nursing homes and family kitchens and hospitals and senior centers, millions of elderly people would sleep safely because the world had chosen love over ledgers. I pulled out my grandmother's pearls worn to every major testimony and trial. They'd belonged to the first victim of our family's tragedy, killed by Christopher 20 years before my parents died. Now they adorn the woman who'd ended the killing chain. "Oik, for you, Grandma," I whispered to the night. "For Mom and Dad, for every grandparent who deserves to die naturally, surrounded by love, not poisoned for profit. We won." A text from Mrs. Patterson made me smile. "Baking conscience cookies for tomorrow's Foundation meeting. My granddaughter's helping. Says she wants to learn the recipe that saved Grandma's life. Teaching her that conscience is the most important ingredient. Thank you for everything, dear." The cycle continued. Not of murder, but of protection. Grandchildren learning from grandparents saved by other grandchildren who refused to kill. Families choosing love over money, conscience over inheritance. The transformation was complete, but the vigilance eternal. As I headed inside to join the celebration, one thought echoed: we'd proven love could defeat any system that tried to eliminate it. The architects of death had met the architects of life. Life won. But the real victory was smaller and larger than global treaties. It was Mrs. Patterson teaching her granddaughter to bake, Marcus choosing conscience over cash, Jennifer transforming guilt into advocacy, Bradley teaching from prison, millions of small choices creating insurmountable change. The strong one had learned strength meant more than surviving. It meant ensuring others could too. And somewhere in heaven, I knew my parents were finally at peace, their deaths having saved millions from sharing their fate. The loss and family tragedy had become humanity's triumph. Love had won the war it never should have had to fight. But we'd keep fighting anyway, forever, because that's what love does. It endures. It transforms. It protects. Always.